Good evening and welcome to the Wednesday, March 27th, 2013 meeting of the Falmouth Conservation Commission. First item on the agenda is other business, and we've invited Pat Harris, who is our Associate Town Council, just to give everyone, but especially those of us here on the board, an update on variance reviews. Thanks, Pat.
Good evening. As Betsy said, I'm Pat Harris, Associate Town Council. Betsy, your chair, had asked me if I would come to speak to you about variances as granted under your local regulations. Falmouth adopted the Falmouth Wetlands Protection bylaw, to provide greater protection for the wetland resources and wetland resource values within the town. Pursuant to the bylaw, the Commission is instructed to promulgate regulations. The regulations are intended to define and clarify the public review and decision-making process established by providing standard definitions, standard performance standards, and uniform procedures. Variances are governed by Section 1013 of your regulations. Pursuant to that provision, the Commission is granted discretion to deny or grant a variance if and only if an applicant has satisfied all preconditions to the grant. Those preconditions are described and defined in 1013 subsection 1. The commentary to 1013 states that the grant of a variance from the regulation is intended to be granted only in rare and unusual cases. And as a result of that, the eligibility for a variance is very difficult to satisfy. Section 1013 sub 1 states that prior to eligibility, a landowner must establish that they have suffered a hardship as a result of application of a particular regulation. And hardship is defined in the regulations at 1004. The definition includes three elements. One is that owing to the unique character of the property evaluated in its totality. 2, application of the regulation is unduly oppressive and would involve substantial economic loss. And 3, that the conditions and characteristics of the property making it unique are not as a result of the applicant's activities. So all three elements have to be satisfied to demonstrate a hardship under your regulations. If an applicant, well, let me step back and give you an example of how the uniqueness of property has come into play in cases of the Commission. In a recent matter, a landowner requested a variance to construct a dock in the waters of Eel Pond. The proposed dock was in excess of the 100-foot maximum length requirement of 1016. The landowner stated that the variance from the length limitation was necessary to comply with two additional regulations under 1016. First, the regulation requiring a 3-foot minimum depth at the end of the dock, and the second regulation prohibiting a mooring field within 35 feet of an area containing significant quantities of shellfish. The landowner claimed that the shallow waters at the edge of their property and the existence of a shellfish bed within 100 feet of the shoreline made his property unique. The Commission heard all the evidence and rejected this claim and made specific findings that the water depth seaward of the lot was not atypical in Falmouth. In fact, many embankments in Falmouth's coastal ponds are shallow due to the fact that they were formed by flooding of shallow slope primary landform, that the property is not unique but is typical of many waterfront properties along Eel Pond and other coastal ponds within the town of Falmouth, and that the presence of shellfish in a coastal pond within 100 feet of the shoreline is not unique in Falmouth. The landowner appealed the denial of the variance, and the Superior Court adopted the landowner's arguments, ruling that the property was in fact unique. However, the commission appealed the decision of the Superior Court to the Massachusetts Appeals Court, and the appeals court in 2011 stated that certiorari review, which is the standard of review employed in an appeal from your decisions, requires that respect be given to the Conservation Commission's decision. And whereas here the agency has, in the discretionary exercise of its expertise, made a choice between two fairly conflicting views, its selection reflects reasonable evidence. The court may not displace the agency's decision. So your decision in that matter was upheld. If a landowner has established a hardship, including the uniqueness requirement, and the commission can then go on to the next preconditions for granting of a variance under the regulations. And those are five preconditions contained in 1013 sub 1. The applicant is required to prove by a preponderance of the evidence that the hardship that has been established was not self-imposed. And if they can establish the second condition, that they don't satisfy performance standards, which goes along with the request, they obviously could not, and they're requesting a variance from it, they have to demonstrate that the project could not reasonably designed to meet those standards. Third, they must show that mitigation measures proposed would allow the project to be conditioned so as to contribute to the resource area values. 4, that the project would not create a nuisance. And 5, that either the resource areas are better protected by approval as opposed to denial, or the project has an overriding public benefit. Now that's a very, very difficult hurdle to overcome. And recently, the commission expressed their interpretation of the overriding public benefit to require a nexus between the benefit conferred and the resource areas impacted by a particular project. That was challenged by a landowner who had sought to construct a dock in Requoit Bay within the velocity zone. The applicant proposed to satisfy the public benefit requirement by giving gifts to the town. 1, to allow the shellfish warden to moor his boat on their dock, and 2, to install a number of amenities on adjacent public property, including a bike rack and a dinghy rack and a kayak rack. The commission found that these proposals did not mitigate the harm caused by the construction of a dock in the V zone, and therefore did not satisfy the overriding public benefit requirement. The Superior Court, this was appealed, and the Superior Court upheld the commission's nexus requirement, stating, it is presumed that to be acceptable, the benefit must protect the resource areas put in harm by the dock. Otherwise, the benefit has no chance of offsetting the potential harm the dock may cause to resource areas. The landowner appealed that Superior Court decision, and last May, the Mass Appeals Court ruled that the commission's interpretation is entitled to deference. Unless it is shown to be arbitrary and capricious, it must be sustained. The court went on to say it is neither arbitrary nor capricious to infer the need for a nexus between the project and the public benefit. The purpose of the bylaw is to prevent storm damage, and it is reasonable that in order to build a dock, a party must show how the dock itself outweighs the damage. Now, if eligibility is established, if an applicant is able to satisfy the hardship requirement and is able to satisfy the 5 preconditions contained in 1013.1, it's then within the discretion of the commission to grant or deny the requested variance. There is no right to a variance. Eligibility merely provides an opportunity. The commissioner's discretionary decision is reviewed under the arbitrary and capricious standard. And the arbitrary capricious standard is similar to the equivalent of an abuse of discretion. And it requires only that the commission, to satisfy their, the commission's obligation to not be arbitrary and capricious, requires only that there be a rational basis for the decision, that it's reasonable. It's important to also understand the reverse of this is true. If eligibility is not established by the applicant, and the commission is then without authority under your own regulations to grant a variance. Once a governmental entity has promulgated regulations, it must comply with those regulations. That gets back to one of the first things I mentioned when I spoke about one of the purposes of the regulations, and that is to provide uniformity of application of the regulations, the performance standards, and that includes the requirements for a variance. So in summation, the commission may utilize its discretion and grant a variance from the performance standards, but that tool is intended to be exercised sparingly. The regulations require a party requesting a variance to first demonstrate eligibility by demonstrating hardship in satisfying the five-part test of 1013. And this is a very heavy burden to establish, and even if eligibility is established, the applicant has no right to a variance. The grant is within your discretion. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Okay, thanks, Pat. Any questions?
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
As I listen to that, it sounds like a project on town property, public property, has some chance.
I'm sorry, Michael, I can't
That's
hear you.
fine. As I listen to it, it
Yes.
sounds as if a project is to be performed on public land, something by the town, whatever. It stands a chance of passing the other criteria.
The
but if it's on
overriding
private
public
property,
benefit might be easier to
I
establish.
don't see how you'd ever pass it on a private.
It's very difficult, and it's intended to be difficult. Variances are granted in various types of land use regulation, and all the case law, whether it be application of local regulations for wetland protection or zoning, state that it's not intended to be, they are not intended to be granted very often, and that it is extremely difficult to satisfy the requirements. The hardship requirement within your regulations is almost tantamount to the requirement of a regulatory taking. It doesn't go that far, but it's a very heavy burden to show that the property evaluated in its totality, the total property, if they're not granted a variance to put a dock or put a deck on property, it's pretty hard to show that there's substantial economic hardship because there are other uses on that property.
Exactly. So it's almost as if we have an authority we don't have.
No, because it's there for a purpose. It's intended to be there if the unusual and unique situation comes up. So I can imagine that there might be situations that would arise where you'd be utilizing it, but it should be utilized sparingly.
I'll take your word for it, I can't envision it.
No, I can't give you an example.
Okay.
Yeah.
A lot of the requests for variances that we see are from properties that were purchased by a landowner, let's say 30 years ago, 40 years ago. And then, for whatever reason, they don't build on the lot. And it meets zoning requirements for buildability or grandfathering and so forth. However, the regulations we have created or been promulgated in the interim now make it almost impossible to build on that lot.
Right.
And so, generally speaking, the homeowner comes in with great cries of anguish about the fact that this is a hardship.
Right.
That they've been taxed for umpteen years as a buildable lot. They bought it as a buildable lot, and on goes the litany. And, the variation on that theme only varies by whoever's making the presentation. So my question is that sort of a thing? What's the hardship? Where's the hardship there, and why is it not a hardship?
Right, one person's hardship isn't another's. I think legally, that still would not satisfy the requirement, because in that instance, a landowner, let's just assume it's not a wetlands regulation, but it's a zoning regulation. Unless there's a specific provision in the zoning bylaw that grandfathered that lot, it would not be buildable if they held on to a lot that in the 1800s was buildable, but in 2013 is not of adequate size. I mean, each case has to be taken on its own merits, and so it's very difficult for me to make broad generalizations. But if when you are presented with a request for a variance, you very carefully go through each one of those criteria, and in hardship, there are 3 elements, and all 3 need to be satisfied. But somebody may be able to convince you they have a hardship. They haven't yet satisfied eligibility requirement. They then have to satisfy the additional 5 requirements. And I understand the commission, is sensitive to the plight of landowners and wants to be able to help them. But variances really are not something that should be given out easily.
Okay. Any other comments?
A comment would be that I think this is why, from my history on this board, everything is truly site-specific. And that's why the record becomes so important, and staff's input and the expertise we have on the board. It's one of the most difficult things I've done on this is to sit and hear the hardships of people. You have empathy for it, but it truly, and we've had things hit you in the face. No good deed goes unpunished. And you end up getting just enough calloused to understand that the variance is there, and if it is met, it can be granted. But a lot of it just is not. It's an extended portion of our regulation.
Yeah, it's in the regulations, and you need to apply the regulations, just like you need to apply the performance standards unless they satisfy the variance requirements. In a hardship in the general personal way doesn't necessarily satisfy the legal definition of hardship. So it requires some discipline.
Certainly. Thank you.
Thanks, Pat. We'll have you back for another little seminar in a not too distant future.
Thanks, Pat.
Thank you, Pat.
Okay, I can see our next performers are eager. They're sitting in the front row also. We're going to have a presentation by the 300 Committee. And just to refresh everyone's memory, the 300 Committee is a not-for-profit in town. It's our land trust, but they have also worked very closely with the Conservation Commission for the past, ever since I've been involved in helping the Conservation Commission in its role as manager of conservation lands. So I just want to thank you again. I'm not going to forget to do that. We'll do it right up front. And Jessica and Alex, right? Yes. Would you like to begin?
Thanks for having us here tonight. Good evening. I'm Alex Atkins, Stewardship Coordinator for the 300 Committee Land Trust. I think it's been about 5 months since the last time we came before the Commission, and it's been a busy 5 months. So tonight I'm really just gonna highlight a few of the projects that we've been working on. Here we have 4 of our volunteer projects. In November, we worked at the Coonamessett Reservation. We focused the work efforts that day on restoring some of the field habitat. There's lots of invasives kind of creeping in from the edge of the field, so really just trying to keep that in check. We were working, this is a photo of the Ranch Road parking lot. And there was actually, to the extent where it was overtaking, spots for people to park. So we're able to clear all that along the fence, mostly autumn olive, some honeysuckle, bittersweet, multifloros, all the usual suspects. We had a great turnout, and we're able to get a lot done along the edge of the field as well. In December, we had a smaller volunteer work day at the Bella Shepherd Reserve, which is a property owned by the 300 Committee Land Trust. It's a small one, about 1.3 acres. And this was an interesting project because the first thing that I needed to do was I actually worked with Mark Kasperzik to reroute the trail. There was originally a trail that had been flagged by a previous volunteer, and we worked to kind of steer it away from the marsh edge, and we're actually able to utilize a pre-existing path down to the water. There's a small orange flagging that you might be able to see up there on the bottom of the picture top right, and that's where we plan to put in a bench. So there'll be parking and access to that nice view down there. Osprey Nest.
What part of town is that?
It's off Central Ave,
Okay.
East Falmouth. So that you're looking at Eel Pond right there in that photo. And then in January, we had a very large turnout at the Bryville Conservation Area. It was about 20 degrees out, and we had 20 volunteers show up. And the focus of this work day was to work on invasive species removal as well. Specifically, we were concentrating on black locusts, which tend to overtake areas where there's lots of sand, sandy soil. And it's an interesting property with a fascinating history that I'm sure you're somewhat familiar with. But in this case, there's rare sandplain grassland species coming up, as well as the native pitch pine and scrub oak. So what we did was we went in there and we took out the black locusts that were starting to establish themselves to kind of basically just give room for nature to do what it's already doing. Great turnout for that work day. And just last month we were working at the Little Pond Conservation Area off of Spring Barge Road. This work day focused primarily on trash removal, just about anything you could imagine. Probably some things you don't want to imagine, but pulled out mountains of trash, and we're able to coordinate with DPW to get it all hauled out, really just a few days later. It was really helpful. Just constantly impressed by the caliber of volunteers that we have here in town. Another long-term project that we've been working on is our winter trail crew. I'm sure that you could all have an idea after the winter we've had. There's a lot of work to be done on our trails. There's trees down everywhere, and then there's just the maintenance of keeping certain areas clear. We started in January, and we're still working. I was actually out working this morning with our trail crew. We've had about 9 different volunteers, and typically about 4 or 5 of them will show up on a work day. We work for 2 to 3 hours. And just over this winter, we've had over 60 volunteer hours of work on the trails. Our first session was at the Roscovics parcel, which is located in North Falmouth. That's a property owned by the town of Falmouth. And that was a smaller parcel. We were able to complete that in one day. In the last 6 work sessions, we've been on the Northern Moraine Trail, which is a section of the larger moraine trail, which goes from Route 151 all the way down to Long Pond, Cruz Pond. We've been concentrating on the section that from Route 151 down to Thomas Landers. I think we have about one session left, and we're also looking forward to hosting a walk in April of the whole entire length of the trail. You can see the photo up there. That is the typical white blaze that the trail is blazed with. So it's fairly easy to follow, and it's a great resource to have in town. Really, I think people are more familiar with the bike path. This is kind of the other unknown north-south route through the town. Looking forward, as well as the monitoring that we're still in the process of. The 300 committee monitors all of the conservation parcels that we own. We also monitor our conservation restrictions that we hold, which are both on private, as well as town land. And in addition to that, we also have a volunteer land steward program, and we have volunteers who adopt a parcel, and besides regularly walking it and maintaining the trails, they also turn in an annual monitoring report to us. Several hundred acres of town land have been monitored, in addition to what we're legally required to monitor our own properties and the conservation restrictions. We have a couple volunteer work days with AmeriCorps Cape Cod coming up this April that Cardoza Farm, April 5th and April 29th. And those work days will primarily focus on field restoration, as well as the removal of old debris, some old concrete, glass, and invasive species removal as well. We're excited to be partnering with them, and our land steward for that property has helped with the planning and be donating a truck as well and some tools. T-Ticket Park is coming along, as you've seen if you've driven by there, and we'll also be working with volunteers there. We're kind of waiting to schedule a date for some of our work days till we have a better idea for the scheduling of some of the landscape contractors that are going to be working there. And the ongoing storm cleanup is really something that we'll be cleaning up for the next several years. It's been a serious winter in terms of tree damage, and that's one thing that we've been able to do is almost steer people towards areas. People will contact us before they go to work on an area, and we will, make sure that everyone's using caution and not going overboard with what they're doing. But it's been great to have, so many people contacting us, trying to help, really. Got several opportunities coming up in the future. I mentioned the Moraine Trail Hike. Our tentative date for that's April 21st. There's also a land conservation workshop at the Wacoit Bay National Estuarine Reserve, and that's a partnership between the 300 Committee and the Cape Cod Compact. It's mainly a workshop focusing landowners to let them know about conservation options on their own property. And finally, we have a Woods Forum at Woods Hole Research Center on May 14th. I'm very excited about that. We have local foresters, professional foresters coming into town. Several professors from UMass Amherst will be coming out in the Natural Resource Department. And really this is, we want to encourage a kind of a roundtable discussion as far as conservation options for woodland owners. And another component of that is during the day we'll be having several site visits, both to privately owned and managed woodlots, as well as some of the public and town properties, talk about possible management options there. I think Phil Benjamin, did some work for the town at one point. Will be coming down for that. He's a professional forester. We're always looking for new volunteers. Feel free to drop me an email. I'll leave you with this last picture. I don't know if you have any guesses of what it might be, but I actually took this working on a baseline report for one of our CRs that we hold on private property on Quistit Harbor. And I did some research that actually sent me back to the Book of Falmouth, and this is a submerged ancient Atlantic white cedar swamp. And I was just fascinated to see this is completely underwater at high tide, but it's been preserved, due to the lack of oxygen and the quality of the wood. That's the knob in the very distance, top right. But it just goes to show that even when you're working on private land, you're really protecting, the natural, history of an area too. And really, a picture like that really tells a story. Does anyone have any questions?
Thanks, Alex. Any questions? Sure. Court.
Going back to your original slides, you were talking about your different activities, and one of them was on the little pond area, and you had a crew there diligently removing huge amounts of trash. Is that your first pass at this since you took it over, or is this an ongoing issue?
Is the trash there an ongoing issue? Mm-hmm. I would say it is. I'm relatively new to town, but when I first went out there this summer, there was an issue, and I think that's something that we'll have to stay on top of. I think once there's one pile of trash, it grows, seems to find a way to grow. So we're able to get a lot out this winter, but there is more, and we plan on going back there as well. And I guess if I could back up to the work day we had at Brivogel too. We're also dealing with some ongoing issues there in terms of ATV damage to the property, which has some unique habitat. And one of the strategies we've been trying to think of is that it's hard to just take out the negative activity. You know, you really have to replace it with something positive. You can't just keep the ATVs out. You have to get people in there hiking and, you know, using the property for what it's worth. So that's one thing where Jessica and I have talked with engineering department at DPW about installing a parking lot there near Blacksmith Shop Road, where you could actually access the property for hiking, you know, 7 days a week, as opposed to now when it's only, you know, while the town dump's open. And that, I feel like people, you know, if we get people out there using the property, we'll kind of push some of that out. And Jessica will be able to tell you a little more about that. Any
Okay.
other questions?
Good, thanks.
Thanks.
And if you can't remember Alex's email, just call the 300 committee and they'll sign you up as a volunteer, I'm sure. Jessica?
Thanks. Yes, thank you. I have just a few brief comments, and if I can back this up. There we go. Just sort of a preview of some of the projects that we're working on. And actually, the 3 projects I'm going to mention all will have some level of documentation and plans that will be submitted to this board for review and approval, hopefully within the next few months. The first one that I want to mention is the Atria property over off of Gifford Street. The building, I'm sure you've seen, has gone up, and one of the conditions of that project was that there be 14.75 acres set aside as open space. And that land will actually be donated to the 300 committee. So we will own and manage the open space that's adjacent to that property. 14.75 acres. There's over 1,000 feet of frontage on Jones Pond. The property also has close to 800 feet of frontage on Souls Pond. And overall, of the 14.75 acres, 4.2 acres is wetland. So that will be permanently protected open space owned by the 300 committee, and we will be conveying a conservation restriction to the compact of conservation trusts. The property has rare species habitat, so the conservation restriction needs to be reviewed and approved by the Massachusetts Fish and Wildlife Department as well. We're in the final stages of drafting that CR. And we expect to be able to submit it here for your review and approval before it goes to the selectmen and then back to the state for their final approval. The timeline for this is that we anticipate that we'll be accepting the deed for this property in July. And we're looking forward to bringing that into our program and assigning stewards and having a management program over there. As Alex mentioned, the Brivogel Conservation Area is a site that we've been working through work days and also talking with the Falmouth Engineering Division about some options for creating a special parking area that is off of Blacksmith Shop Road but before the gate so that we can encourage access. The larger land management plan that we're working on with the Brivogel Working Group is still underway. And that would include a management plan that Joanne Muramoto is working on with us and a restoration plan. And we're trying to gather more volunteer resources to get those plans created and to move forward with some management and restoration over there. The last project I'll mention is the T-Ticket Park project. The Phase 1 construction has begun. The next part of that would be completing all the spreading of the topsoil, the plantings, and installing park entry paths and the driveway. We're planning now for Phase 2. So Phase 1 limit of work is here. The 100-foot wetland buffer is here. So at this point, we're working outside of Conservation Commission jurisdiction. We're getting ready for the next phase, which is within your jurisdiction. This is a blow-up here, or a larger version of the concept plan. And here's the 100-foot setback from the wetland. So this is a concept plan that you've seen. The phase where we are now is we need to work with an engineer to do the design development and the specifications so that we can work with you before we move forward with any additional trails. We would like to install wetland boardwalk, observation platform, outdoor classroom. So as Phase 1 is in construction phase, Phase 2 is, we're moving forward in earnest with the planning and engineering for that, and we look forward to working through that process. This is just a photograph that was taken last June, and there's much more water there now. But this shows you the view from the back property line looking towards T-Ticket Highway. And this here is an illustration that our landscape architect did, showing one of the trails that would go back in what they're calling the rim of the property. This is a hill that goes up, and then T-Ticket School is back in this corner. So implementation of Phase 1 now, and then looking forward to Phase 2, planning and engineering and wetland restoration. At this point, we have a passive management approach with the wetland of seeing what comes in. We have some fabulous volunteers who've done some surveys of the plants that are there the last 2 years in May. So we have a great inventory, and we're keeping an eye on things and making sure that we'll be managing invasives and anything that does come in. And it's been a work in progress and a great project to work on right in the heart of T-Ticket. That's all we have for tonight. Just want to say we thank you. This format where the 300 Committee is presenting to the Conservation Commission twice a year, we think is helpful because it allows us to keep in better touch with you and what we're doing on town land and conservation land in general. So we're always open to questions and any feedback that you have, but we'll look forward to coming back in the next few months with these additional little projects as we're ready to move them forward.
That's great, thanks. And let's see if we have any questions here. Tom?
The Atria parcel, before that project started, was fortunate enough to walk through, and did they anticipate the old boardwalks that went through part of the swamp, renovating that type of thing, creating more trails through the old putting green area and such?
Right. Yes, the boardwalks have actually been removed by the landowner, the existing owner, for liability reasons. The conservation restriction, as it's drafted, has a reserved right to install boardwalks in the same location where they were, and they're shown on the plan of land. We're discussing having some extensions, like a bog bridge, if you will, to protect some of the land leading up to the boardwalk in the resource area. So we certainly hope to be able to do that. So as a reserved right in the conservation restriction, and then the 300 Committee would need to work on grants and identifying funding sources to actually construct. There's also, in the conservation restriction plan, a pathway that goes to a knoll area, a lookout, that would have benches, so nice recreation space. So there are trails and boardwalks planned.
I really think that can be a nice space, including the people that are going to be there.
Absolutely.
I think it's
Yeah.
an opportunity that's really going to be nice.
Absolutely.
Anything else? Okay, before you go, I just want to point out what I think people don't realize is how much time Jen and you spend on meetings for various phases. And I think people should really appreciate that. These things don't happen just 2 meetings a year.
Right.
They move along because you stay in close
Throughout the year.
communication and keep communicating with us when you need our input. So we appreciate that.
Yep, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Jess. Thank you, Alex.
There's people here?
There's an audience. All right, Bob, you're up. Discussion and vote Teledyne Instruments Conservation Restriction. Good evening.
Good evening. Thanks, Madam Chairman. I'm Bob Ament, attorney in Falmouth. I represent Teledyne Instruments, Inc. We were before the Conservation Commission a couple of months ago to introduce to you the conservation restriction requirement for the Teledyne expansion that is under construction at the east end of Edgerton Drive off of Route 28A in North Falmouth. This is a regulatory requirement conservation restriction that was imposed by the Cape Cod Commission. It protects, I believe it's 5.16 acres of land of a 14.38 acre industrial site that, when the present construction is done, will have approximately 60,000 square foot of manufacturing space on the property. There's conservation or open space land associated with subdivisions both to the north and the south of this property, and the superhighway, Route 28, is the easterly abutter. Also immediately to the north is the railroad right-of-way of the Commonwealth that the trash train continues to use to get to Otis. So this Conservation Commission expands existing open space area. Now, I hardly think I need to tell you much about the importance of this conservation restriction, but I want to add that it is a regulatory requirement for an important project for Falmouth that expands appropriate manufacturing. It's a project that was strongly supported by the Board of Selectmen in their letter to the Cape Cod Commission, and we must put a conservation restriction on this property. The Cape Cod Commission required that even though this property is mapped as habitat for the eastern box turtle, a rare species, and therefore the same area, 5.16 acres, has already, as a regulatory requirement, been subjected to an open space restriction, a permanent open space restriction in favor of both the town and the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. That's already recorded at the Registry of Deeds, and the conservation restriction that the Cape Cod Commission also required, perhaps a level of redundancy unnecessary, but nonetheless required, is on the exact same 5.16 acre piece. But we have to put this on record. It has been, as I said, approved by the Cape Cod Commission, and it has been submitted to the state, to the reviewer Irene Del Bono for her review. She hasn't yet gotten back to us about it, but it's the same form that has been used, for instance, with the approved restriction for the Woods Hole Oceanographic in connection with a building that they built last year. But there is a difference, and that is that that's as a result of concerns that were raised a couple of months ago by at least one member of the commission, Mr. Schmidt, about the monitoring process. Now, this conservation restriction is, according to the state, the 78th conservation restriction from Falmouth that's been submitted to the state for approval. It's CR number 78. And I believe this will be the first conservation restriction that has this monitoring requirement where the owner of the property will be required to submit monitoring reports. And we put that in response to the concern that the monitoring process is some amount of work, and the town is somewhat shorthanded at this time. And even though the holding of conservation restrictions is encouraged, and the town policy requires that the conservation restriction area be controlled and managed by the commission, and that it approve and make recommendations to the selectmen for the acceptance of conservation restrictions. And the monitoring has been, and I think appropriately is, a public function, and the town has the right to enter onto the property under the terms of the conservation restriction for that purpose. Despite all of that, we are providing in this, as a result of the concern raised by the commission, that there be a biannual report filed by the by a qualified engineer or land surveyor that specifically says that there are no violations of the conservation restriction terms and conditions. Now, basically, that means confirming that nothing is going on the property, because this is simply wooded area that will have to be left in its natural state. Photos and a report by an engineering firm would be submitted to the town to confirm that, and the town also would be authorized whenever it wants to go check as well. So that's the change that's been made to the document since you saw it last. That's the only change that's been made, to add a specific provision for that monitoring. And we're hoping that with that done, you will approve the town's acceptance of this conservation restriction. I would be happy to answer any questions to the extent that I can.
Thanks, Bob. Jen, do you have any questions?
I have no question, Madam Chairman. You should have all received a copy of the amended CR monitor requirement around March 6th.
Yep,
A few
we did.
months ago.
Yep. Any questions? If anyone doesn't have a question, somebody could offer a motion.
I'll move that we accept the conservation restriction as presented and with the amendment.
Second.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstention? Unanimous, so moved. Thank you,
for
Bob.
your help.
Thank you, Bob.
Now, before we get to minutes, we have one more item, which I'm sure you can't quite see, but Mike brought this up. It's a letter that has to be, that we have to discuss, and if we choose to send it, we have to do it in a timely manner. So, Mike?
Certainly. I am the Conservation Commission's representative to the Community Preservation Committee, a committee on a committee. I'd like to spend a few minutes to talk about how I think that committee is doing from our perspective of conservation. A little history. The whole process of the CPC came around in 2005 with about 85% approval to the town. Since then, the funding is 3% of Falmouth property taxes plus a matching fund from the state. Matching today, we've received about $16,600,000 of the town's money into it, and have received $9,600 and change, $9,650,000 and change from the state. I had a very generous employer, and I had a 401k. I put in 10%, and he put in 5%, and I thought it was a great deal. This is a deal that's even better. The town puts in $16 million against $9 million, 60%, a little less. I think it's important. The town has great control over it. It's not that it's just being spent, and the very fact that Conservation Commission is, on part of that committee and watches it through, I think is important. But 78% of the money has gone to the town. 21% of the money has gone to non-town entities. So and less than 1%, if you're doing the math and following, goes to nonprofits. It is probably the most democratic of all processes. An applicant applies, say, for a very type of specific problem. CPC looks at it and it goes to town meeting. If there's something that's amok, it should be caught at least on 2 or 3 sieves, so I think it's very good. All that being history is, I've been a member for more than 6 months now, and I've been watching, and I guess my observation is that the CPC is very aware of the goals of our wetland regulations, and it does its best to see that they're followed in a very deliberate manner. Now, I guess it's the yin and yang of the process. You have the the Conservation Commission sits at the end of the safety net, making sure that people do the right thing and don't harm the environment. And on the other end, we have the CPC, who is pushing money, driving people to do the right thing. Falmouth is a very precious place. I mean, if I didn't believe that, I wouldn't be here, but most places are precious. But we have things that have to be served, and it doesn't just happen. It has to have someone on the end of this to catch the safety net, to say we're not doing things that are going to screw it up for future, excuse the vulgarity, for future generations, and at the same time, we're pushing people in the right direction. So with that said, I'm very happy and proud to be a member of both committees, and to be truthful, which kind of statute today, there will be an article coming up before the town that says, you know, should we continue on this path, or should we stop and save some money? First of all, I think it's silly to not go down this road. We're getting money to fund the things that we think are important. To stop doing that is a mistake. And two, I think it's on the right track. They're doing a good job. So with that, I'd like to, this committee, the commission, to write a letter, you know, endorsing what's going on and saying favor. But it should come from us and with a vote. So somebody could have a question. I'll do my best. I'm a new member to that, and I'm sure there are people who have more knowledge of it than I do, and I'll do my best to answer.
Okay, so I think what I hear you doing is proposing a motion that we write a letter to the CPC
Yes.
saying that we support the activities of the CPC, and we would like the CPC to continue.
That would be my motion directly.
And I will second that.
Okay, do we have any further discussion on it?
Only to say that, Mike, you are an eloquent man that has a great way with a simple word.
Well, I don't know about that.
And my comment will be, thank you for the time that you spend and all the other members of the CPC. That's a committee that spends a lot of time, and I think all of us have seen activities around town that have, I mean, buildings and open space areas and so forth that have been supported through CPC funding. So we have a motion and a second on the table to write a letter, which Mike is going to draft, and I'll work with him on it, and we'll send it. So all in favor of the motion on the table, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstention? Unanimous, so moved.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mike.
Good job.
Okay, minutes. Now, if I remember, it says none, but I think we had two from the last time.
I did, and we'll transfer those over to next week.
Okay, because I don't remember what the dates were. All I remembered was that I wasn't on one of them.
Dates were, Madam Chair, the dates were Wednesday, the 13th of February, and Wednesday, the 27th.
But do we have to wait? Does that have to be published? That,
Yes.
yeah, so we have to wait. So
Okay.
keep them, don't throw them away, Courtney, because I'm sure you
One
have,
of them I
I'm sure
can't
you've read
vote
them.
on
Oh,
anyway,
you
because
can't
I
vote.
wasn't here.
All right. Okay, next is request for determination of applicability. First is, and I see Amy eager to go home. Department of Public Works wastewater management, care of Amy Lowell, Surf Drive, map 470700A 000, Robbins Road, map 4602001111C, 20 Academy Lane, South Park Road, Falmouth, Massachusetts, for permission to remove a 550-gallon FRP, which is a fiberglass reinforced plastic, fuel storage tank from a concrete underground vault adjacent to a municipal wastewater lift station at 3 locations, and to clean a 550-gallon FRP tank, fill with cement slurry, and leave in place. Work includes removal of fill to be stored in a truck, removal of pavement and repaving in the same footprint, loam and seed at one site with erosion control, and removal and reuse or replacement of one tree. Jen?
Yes, Madam Chairman, Mark went on a site visit with Ms. Lowell and the DPW to review these sites, and at this point, we're recommending a negative 2 under the state bylaw, but the boundaries not confirmed.
So moved.
Second.
Any questions on the board? And just for those of you who might not know about request for determination of applicability, RDAs. If it's a negative determination, that means the applicant can go ahead and do what they want. I've never actually figured out why it's called negative, but
There's no impact.
there's no impact, all right. So motion on the table is to accept staff's recommendation of a negative determination. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstention? Unanimous, so moved. Good night. Jeffrey Pritchard, 174 Grand Avenue, East Falmouth, for permission to remove existing deck and replace in same footprint, along with installation of 5 to 6 new footings.
Yes, Madam Chairman, staff reviewed the project, was recommending a -2 under the state and bylaw with the resource area boundaries non-conforming.
So moved. Second.
Any questions? Any questions from the audience? Okay, all in favor of the motion on the table, which is to accept staff's recommendation of a negative determination, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Unanimous, so moved. Okay, now request for hearings under a notice of intent. All hearings of the Falmouth Conservation Commission are heard simultaneously under the Massachusetts Wetlands Protection Act and the Falmouth Wetlands Bylaw. Although a single decision is issued, it represents a separate decision under each authority. Okay, first up is Gansett Trust Trustees, care of Jim Ware, Lot B, Gansett Road, map 4903016000B, Woods Hole, Massachusetts, for permission to replace 28 of the existing 12-inch pilings with 26 new green heart pilings, 10 inches in diameter, on the existing pier using a barge to include a horizontal lift, the installation and removal of temporary support timbers to restore coastal dune habitat on the property, and the associated excavating, grading, and landscaping.
Madam Chair, I will
Yes.
be recusing myself from this hearing.
Okay,
Thank you.
thanks. Don't wander too far down the hall. We'll come and get you. Jen?
I'll say that in my comments and going through the presentation.
Matt, good evening.
Good evening. Thank you, Madam Chairman. For the record, Matt Costa, Costa Associates, representing the applicant, Gansett Trust. You should have in all your packets, color 11 by 17 is very easy to follow rather than flipping through multiple sheets. Property is located Lot B off of Gansett Road. It's adjacent to the Woods Hole Golf Course. If you went down there, you could see, basically, as you look out over the water, the area where the knob is. The resource areas for this site were delineated by LEC Environmental on January 15th and include a freshwater wetland, a coastal dune, coastal beach area, and a non-eroding coastal bank, in addition to the land under the ocean. What we're proposing to do in this project is to replace the pilings on the existing pier. We have an existing licensed pier, and if you've read the narrative, I gave you a complete history to that license and the history of the pier. It actually dates back to 1928. We're proposing to replace the piles and to maintain the existing walkway and handrails. We're going to elevate those, raise them up about 1.5 feet to account for their adjusted sea level, and set them back down on the new piles and new cross bracing. Part of this project, as part of the approval for the original pier, there was an order of conditions issued in 1996 when the applicants filed for a new Chapter 91 license, because there was a variation from the 1928 license. So in 1996, there was an order of conditions issued, and that order of conditions stated that the floats were to be stored in the parking area. That didn't happen most of the time, and as a result, there was some damage to the dune area on the site. I'm going to give you a picture that shows you exactly an aerial of the float storage location And you can reference that on the plan where we're proposing mitigation for the dune. You can see to the west of the pier, we have an area shown on the plan of coastal dune mitigation area. That's the area delineated by LEC as dune area and area that has been observed as been disturbed or degraded because of the float storage. So what we're proposing to do is to supplement that area with some sand, approximately 60 to 69 yards, and replant it with American beach grass. Again, if you refer to the narrative, there's a very detailed methodology for the coastal dune mitigation construction and monitoring. There's a 3-year monitoring plan that we included in that. In addition to that, there is included in the notice of intent itself was a dune restoration guidebook, if you will, that was prepared by a cooperative group headed by Hui, essentially. And we included that right in the notice of intent so that the applicant's contractor would have a very definitive guide on their available options on how they wanted to construct the fencing for the dune as part of the dune mitigation. Because this is not just planting grass, you're going to have some fencing there to sort of catch the wind-blown sand and the wave run-up. So that is one portion of the work that we're proposing in that area that is on the dune. And again, will be part of this order of conditions will be monitored for 3 years. The construction of the pier, if you refer to sheet 2, I have a couple of different views in there, and it shows you exactly how they're going to approach the construction of it. And they're going to be doing this in sections. So what will happen is, if you were to work from the land side, they're going to detach the sections. We'll first detach all of the water and electric, and then detach the sections in between the piles. They're going to brace those through either cribbing or temporary piling and bracing placements. They're going to remove the old piles, and they're going to install new green heart piles. Then they're going to install the cross bracing and lower that back down into place and continue that process until they're done. Again, I just have you refer to the narrative because there is a very detailed construction methodology in there and exactly all of the steps and machinery that was going to be used. As part of this application, we worked closely with staff and we acknowledged that there's eelgrass in the area of the pier most likely, and there will be eelgrass in the area that there's work proposed. If you look at the soundings shown on the plan, they're on a mean low water datum, so those negative numbers are the elevation below mean low water. I have outlined a limit of work area, and that limit of work area designates the area where the barge must operate between the times of 2 hours before and 2 hours after high tide. It does not include the entire pier, because if you look at the depths, we start getting into 2.8 to 4 to 6 feet below mean low water. So the barge that they're using is a 30 by 25 foot barge that loaded draws 12 inches. So there's not going to be any real damage when we're at mean low water. We have 3 feet already. There's going to be no damage to the substrate or any eelgrass that may be in the area. Due to the time of year that we're filing this application, we were not able to identify the eelgrass bed areas. We did include in this application, and specifically noted it in the narrative and on the plan, that no work for the pier construction shall be done until the eelgrass areas have been mapped, identified on the plan, and submitted to the conservation agent. We've, again, worked with staff closely on that, just to make sure that the contractor understands it, that all that necessary requirements are noted on the plan, and that if there are found to be significant eelgrass beds in the area, which we presume, then we will pay extra close attention to protecting them. But we believe that at this point, given the adequate water depth and the conditions that we have self-imposed, there is no potential threat to those beds. And given the fact that this pier has been in existence for close to 80 years now, if there is eelgrass there, just by virtue of the fact alone that the activity surrounding the pier is not showing to be a detriment. I think that about covers it. With that, I would be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thanks, Matt. Jen?
Madam Chairman, Mark has reviewed this project extensively with regards to repairing the coastal dune. We're happy to see the restoration of the coastal dune. That area was significantly damaged by where the floats were stored. As far as the eelgrass goes, the applicant should realize that their construction methodology, as detailed as it is, may need modification depending on where the eelgrass is mapped. And you can make a lot of assumptions and say we're not going to harm the eelgrass, but when you're bringing in a barge, so just have your client be aware of that. When that area is mapped, there might be a shift in your methodology, but it was thought out. Those are my only comments.
Okay. Any questions on the board?
Yep.
Court?
Have you, you're not required to do a shellfish survey on this, is that correct?
Existing pier, Courtney, they're just doing it in the same footprint.
Well, I raised the question because on a number of occasions, there have been discussions in front of this board on the effect of docks on shellfish. And I oftentimes would cite an example of the fact that I used to go clamming off of docks and find tons of quahogs. Ironically, the example that I gave is this very dock. And I would find quahogs this big in great abundance all around this pier. I have no issue with their doing the work. However, I would like to have something done to relay the shellfish out of that area while this work's being done because of the potential damage that could be done to those fish. I mean, there's a lot of shellfish there.
I thought you weren't supposed to give away your secrets.
Well,
It's
and
good
now that
shellfish.
the
Well, I
whole
know,
town
not
knows, there's not
generally.
going to be so many
Yeah, they
shellfish.
might all disappear
That was
this
a while
summer.
ago, I don't go there anymore.
I think we can agree to a condition along those lines.
No, I mean, it's a fine product. You gotta do what you have to do, but I'm concerned, and I think that I'd like to condition this, that the shellfish be relayed out under the supervision of the shellfish warden.
Tom?
Methodology reading it is, step by step, and pretty much in your testimony, you had said, lift single sections at a time, embraced with temporary support system. That's what's in the narrative. And you were saying temporary piles. Would they be similar to the ones that you have above me in high water, just a smaller 6x6 with a foot on the bottom? Or are you going to be driving another pile to support that?
We're actually going to be doing both, and we looked closely at it. We're going to have to, simply because of the depth, and we're worried about the rigidity, the piles being rigid enough to support the pier in the deeper water. They're going to have to drive some piles in the waters where we're at, 5 to 6 feet at mean low water. They will be basically blocking up to the point where they can't block anymore, near mean high water. Then there would be piles with sort of big foots on them.
Okay, do you know, what size piles are you gonna use for the 10?
8-inch.
8-inch, okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Did you want to-
Oh, the Green Heart, is that the best choice?
Yeah.
We've had discussion on whether, and it goes back and forth on the Green Heart being not the best choice of piles.
I can tell you, my latest back and forth was that I was on a panel with a couple of forestry people from the tropics, and we went out to dinner, and I said, well, forestry, this is a question that comes up on our Conservation Commission. And both of them were concerned with the use of Green Heart. There's, apparently, this is one of the parts of the discussion is that if it's certified from certain plantations that are growing it, but it's very hard to have the sort of chain of evidence that it's really from those, and a lot of it apparently comes from the native forest.
Yeah, on that line, we've discussed that there's a product now which is accepted for marine use, which is a southern yellow pine. It's glass infused. And I wish I could remember the name of it, but I know Wood Lumber sells the material, and you could certainly get more information on it. And it's got the same ratings in terms of longevity as, say, pressure treated or some of these other products, but there's no arsenic or any of the other bad things that come off of pressure treated.
Some of the other pressure treated, yeah.
You might want to look into that. I think that we need to have some kind of, going forward, some kind of policy on this stuff.
Yeah, well, I know it has sort of gone back and forth.
No, I know it has.
And that's why I asked these people. So,
We'll look into it.
okay, good.
No questions.
Are there any other questions? Mike?
You're limited, I appreciate delineating an area of work that is laid out. And I assume that is developed thinking about the contractors going to do the work in mind, the bodges appropriate.
Right. We work closely with the contractor on this.
But I do appreciate somebody thinking about where you need the limited work, where you like it.
Thank you.
There are a lot of details, and I think you did a good job. You and whoever
Oh,
else.
bless my heart.
Who else? Oh, my goodness, are you going to write it down? That's what some of the engineers, or I think that what Mike gave us was an attaboy. We can give you an attaboy for,
Well, thank you very much. I'm glad
good
this is
presentation.
recorded. Nobody would believe me.
All right.
Madam Chairman, one question, Matt, did you receive DMS letter, they sent it yesterday?
Yes.
Oh,
And I did, that was my only question. DMF report and time of year restriction.
I'm sorry?
I'm sure there's a time of year restriction, isn't there?
No.
There isn't.
No, but they're very concerned about eelgrass, which is why I said the methodology may be modified, depending where the eelgrass is now.
Yeah.
Make a motion to close the hearing and take it under advisement.
Second.
Any other questions? Any questions from the audience? Okay, all in favor of the motion on the table, which is to close the hearing and take it under advisement, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Unanimous, so moved.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Matt.
You're good, Matt.
Paul and Patricia Hogan, 112 Racing Beach Avenue, Falmouth, for permission to maintain approximately 240 linear feet of existing riprap seawall using chink stones to fill the voids, the removal of unpermitted stone walkway area, installation of native woody buffer plantings and dry wells and associated clearing, excavating, grading, and landscaping. And Tommy's back with us. Okay, good evening, Mike. Jen? Any questions? Thank you, Mike. That's for you.
For those of you
There you
that
go.
didn't get a chance to go to the site, planting area in question, there are photographs in the main file, so that you can get them back after.
Good evening, Mike.
Madam Chairman, members of the commission, my name is Michael Borselli from Falmouth Engineering, and I represent the applicant. I'm joined tonight by Angela Tanner from Raposa Landscape. Raposa Landscape did the planting plan that was part of our application, and she can go through the details of that in a couple minutes. Mr. Hogan, the property owner at 112 Racing Beach Avenue, acquired the property not too long ago, and adopted some issues with compliance that we're here tonight to hopefully get permission to remedy. They were not things that he had done. They were outstanding from work done by the previous owner. We've worked with Mark Haspezic to go through these fixes, if you will, and it was appropriate, we thought, to file a notice of intent because there are some construction activities, minor construction activities. But we also are hopeful to get permission from you to do some, have permission to do some limited maintenance on the riprap seawall as sort of extra work over and above the compliance deficiencies. So the property at 112 Racing Beach Avenue is a developed residential lot. It has frontage on Buzzards Bay to the west. There's resource areas are land under the ocean. There's a rocky beach. There's a man-made coastal bank, or a coastal bank that has riprap. It at one point in time had been armored. At the top of the coastal bank is an existing vegetated buffer, but there are some areas where the buffer is not very wide. And they include this area with the lighter green color. There was some things done in this area that, I should say it another way, there was access through this area when work was done on the seawall that was never restored the way that the Conservation Commission would expect it to be restored. And then the previous owner decided to sort of celebrate that area a little bit, and they put some unpermitted stone walkway through there. There's some crushed stone, sort of sparsely landscaped areas. So that area should have been restored with native buffer plantings. So that's one of the activities we're proposing to do. We're requesting that we reserve a 4-foot wide pathway through the buffer just so there's access to the seawall, because you can walk across the top and walk carefully down through it. So we're asking permission to, reserve that access path. So the buffer planting is one of the activities. Another reason for the path is there are some areas on the wall that could use some hand chinking of stone. There's no access to this wall by heavy equipment. If it ever got damaged, it would be significant damage. It would be a big problem to get there to fix it. It's in relatively good condition. It's been there for a very long time, but there are some signs of some places, some voids where some stones could be placed, and Mr. Hogan wants to just be aware of that and continue to maintain that by hand so that it doesn't become a bigger problem. He doesn't expect there to be very much work. We've looked at it with him. There's a few spots that maybe some stones could be placed. Depends on how much work you really want to do at one time. But it's not the type of project that you have to go in and do wholesale chinking of the voids. But we wanted to get a permit that would at least give them 3 years to reserve the right to, on occasion, have handwork done by placement of stones into those voids. And then the final construction activity proposed on the site is simply to put 2 new dry wells in. There are 2 dry wells, and they've been there for a very long time, but since Mr. Hogan has purchased the properties, he's observed that those on a heavy rainstorm can get surcharged, so he wants to have those replaced. Construction access would be by, at most, a bobcat, and even more likely hand-delivered by a hand truck or a wheelbarrow to the path, the stones, and then from here, they have to be hand-carried to wherever you might need to fill in the voids. So there's really no way to get there with heavy equipment. The driveway is here, but there's a grade change. There's a stone wall that has about 3-foot elevation. There's a walkway here, but it's only 4 feet wide. So the site is limited for access. So the work would all be done, any work to the wall would be done by hand. I think that pretty much goes over the activities, the specifics of the landscape. I'll turn that over to Angela to go over with you, and then we're here to answer any questions.
Okay, thanks, Mike. Good evening, Angela.
Hello. I'm Angela Tanner with Reposa Landscape, and I have a simple. You can see that we've filled the area that is currently gravel, crushed stone. We removed the pathway, and we've filled the entire area with plants, 4 different species. Bayberry on the very outside, closest to the water, and a mix of Rosa virginiana and Ilex verticillata on the inside of the bayberry, and 3 northeastern red cedars, juniperus. And then we also are showing along the fence to the south, removing some of the non-native grasses down there and doing another row of bayberry. And maintaining the path, and also requesting the right to maintain that area in the future. A lot of the Rosa rugosa that's growing up in here, when it gets scraggly, we'd like to be able to remove some of the invasive vines that are surrounding it and give it a little bit of rejuvenation, pruning, and also the new plantings to be able to keep those invasive vines out of those areas. That's
Okay.
it.
Thanks. Jen?
Yes, Madam Chairman, I have a few questions. Angela, I have no problem with your planting plan.
Okay.
So I have a couple of questions for Mike, and possibly you. This, did you say the Hogans recently bought the property? You keep saying that they recently acquired, or they're new
Well, I think they've owned it for like 3 or 4 years, but there was an outstanding compliance.
They've owned it for a little bit longer than that, Mike. What are your clients' names? Paul Hogan?
Mm.
I have an order of conditions from 98 issued to them, so I don't think it's as recent as you think. So anyway, Mike, you just kind of threw me when you kept saying that, because I've heard this name multiple times since I've been in this position, just because of some concerns that area kind of had. I've just heard the name before, that's why you just threw me on that one. So they will need to remove the pea stone. They've done a great, Angela's done a nice job with the plan. I don't know the path. I do have a question about that little stone wall though. And that's something I forgot to mention too, when I talked to you this afternoon, that little stone wall along where all that little pea stone is. Mark says did Mark speak to you about that?
I'm not sure which
Um, That one. Little landscape stone wall along
Right
the
there.
edge of the existing, yes, that one right over there. The board, that we don't have a permit for, it's not on any of the plans, it's a little landscape feature, there's a photo of it in the file, so the board will need to decide whether or not you want that removed from the site when they do the plantings or remain. And that's my only comment.
I could comment on that. We're happy to have that as a condition.
Okay, that's great. Other than that, it's a fairly simple project. They're trying to deal with an old compliance issue and wrap in work on the seawall at the same time.
Could we have a plan that includes resource areas and resource area setbacks? Mike?
Did you bring that? I thought that's what you were handing me before, but it's not. Yes, and the plan you have before you, Mike's dropping off a plan right now. Just a small issue was left off the top of the coastal bank, the buffers to that bank and riverfront area. So that's a copy of the plan with the appropriate resource areas delineated and setbacks. Mike, there's only need for one of those in the file.
You only have to put one in.
Put one in the file. Thank you.
Leave the original and then add that.
Yeah, Madam Chairman, we added that information to the plan, and we became aware of the fact that through a separate case, through an abutter, that there was in fact a riverfront area, because there's a perennial...
We had a long discussion about
Yeah,
that.
we know about it.
We
know
know all
about
about it. Those
So-
of us who were on the board at the time.
So just so that the plan is technically complete and all the resource areas are on it, the plan that I just handed you has those resource areas that...
Okay, and it's useful when somebody goes back to look in the file to do something in the future, to have all those on the plan of record. No questions?
No questions.
I felt a little bit like a Boy Scout climbing along the front of the wall. I think you're probably going to have more chinking than you think. You got all this concrete that has been put in, and you stop moving some of this stuff. So whatever you're thinking you're doing, I'm approving it. The wall, I think, needs preserving.
Yes.
But it may be more work than you think.
Well, if I could just follow up, we met with a contractor out there, and we walked it, and maybe he was diminishing how much it needed, because he'd be the guy that would be having to carry all the rocks by hand, but I think it's sort of, it's tough to really
Yeah, I think we start to move the concrete.
quantify it. Yeah,
You're gonna knock some concrete out to get the stones in.
Yeah.
And I think you may find there's more voids behind that stone than you
right. I can tell you that Mr. Ho, this is his worry on the property, that he's always out there looking at it, and he thinks he sees things moving all the time, and he wants to, like, be proactive with it.
I applaud him. That's, you know.
If it's the contractor that Jen thinks that we discussed, he's a strong,
Yeah, we
he's
expect
strong.
him to be the likely contractor.
Yeah. Court,
No questions.
Tommy,
The dry wells are going in the same place as they are now.
Yeah, they're gonna pull out the old ones and hopefully put them basically in the same place, yes.
are they gonna be bigger? Is that how they're gonna work, or
I
they're
think
plugged,
they just
or-
were plugged and failed, and they were never really up to standard.
And is the planting plan, was that created to satisfy an old order of conditions, 98, or?
Yes, it was, I didn't honestly think it was that old. It was to satisfy a previous order that was never, compliance was never applied for. And we met Mark on site, and we walked through various issues, and we looked at aerial photos, and we discovered that that area should have been planted.
And Jen, this is gonna satisfy staff? what they
Yes, that's
proposed?
fine. I mean, the area was natural before. There wasn't really a planting plan. It was natural vegetation. Obviously, the vegetation over the years has been either cut back or moved for whatever reason to maintain the wall. The area just wasn't restored. So this is
they can get compliance with this, so the next time they go to do something.
You're gonna close out the old one,
When-
plantings are done?
So when this order gets issued, then this planting is done. I think we'll be able to close out the old order, and this one will have a 3-year life, and we may ask for an extension depending on the situation with the wall at that time.
That's
But
fine.
that's the plan.
To continue with your
Yeah, we
thinking.
won't be able to issue compliance until all the plantings are in and the
Right.
wall is gone and everything, but other than that, that's fine.
Thank you.
Okay.
Motion to
Anybody?
close the hearing and take it under advisement.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second on the table. Are there any questions from the audience? Any more questions? Any final comments? All right, motion on the table is to close the hearing and take it under advisement. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Any abstention? Unanimous, so moved. Thanks, Mike. And Angela, right. Okay, White Sands Association and Gregory Marcotte, 59 Davis Neck Road and south end of Davis Neck Road, East Falmouth, for permission to nourish a 135-foot section of coastal beach by placing a maximum of 450 cubic yards of sand over a 3-year period that includes clearing an 8-foot wide construction access through town of Falmouth right-of-way, restoration of vegetation and associated clearing, excavating, grading, and landscaping. Jen?
Yes, Madam Chairman, I'll hold any of my comments until after Mr. Borselli's presentation.
Good evening again, Mike.
Madam Chairman, for the record, Michael Borselli. I represent White Sands Association and Greg Marcotte, the co-applicants in this notice of intent application. I am joined tonight by Bill Doherty, who is a trustee and treasurer of White Sands Association.
Right here? Okay.
Mr. Marcotte could not be here tonight. I will bring up a issue before I make my presentation, just sort of to face it first. We've become aware of a situation where some snow fencing and the framing for some snow fencing has blown over, if you will. If you've been to the site, you saw it. It's some strapping that was built as a frame, and then snow fencing was attached to it. Originally, that was done and installed to create a windbreak because of the mitigation planting that was not surviving because of the significant winds, and it wasn't properly watered. So if you've been to the site, you will have noticed, or you could not really not notice because you had to walk through the area, that there's some debris there. That fence was installed originally when the seawall was reconstructed, when it became clear that the mitigation planting was not surviving. It was an attempt, initial attempt was to try to block the wind so that the mitigation planting required for the seawall would hopefully survive. But it wasn't really maintained and watered properly by the previous owner, the party responsible for maintaining the vegetation. Then along came Mr. Marcotte, who acquired a property and an interest in this whole project. He acquired this property. The area where the debris is here, which was the construction access for the wall. It's where the required mitigation planting was. I think that Mr. Marcotte acquired the property this past summer, if I'm right, middle summer, and at title transfer, it became an issue because the mitigation planting and the compliance hadn't been satisfied. So he posted a bond to ensure you that he would fix it. He would fix the plants. What he didn't do, what he should have done, I guess, was remove that snow fencing, which I learned tonight blew down during Sandy. I haven't been on the site for a long time, only because I've been there so much I didn't really revisit the site. When I was there, that fencing was up, but sometime after I had been there, and I learned tonight Sandy blew it down. Someone should have taken it out of there. Mr. Marcotte didn't. He was new to the neighborhood. He didn't live there. It had just been completed. It was a summer home. So I talked to him about it as soon as I learned today that it was down, and he told me to report to you that he apologizes that it is still there, and he can make arrangements tomorrow to have it removed. I mean, assuming that's what we assume that's what we want to happen.
So I think we'll just agree with that right now. Jen, do you have a problem with that?
No.
So I'm going to report to him tomorrow that you want it out of there. So it is in a place that is right now a bunch of dead bayberries that didn't survive. So as ugly and bad as it looks, and it's had the potential to blow all around, I'm surprised it stayed where it was. It didn't kill anything, but it shouldn't be there. So I just thought I'd mention that before I get berated for doing something I didn't do. So that being said, the application is actually a proposal to do meat, beach, nourishment, very similar to other projects you've seen. In fact, right directly next door, just to the west, the first lot, and then directly to the west of them are two private property owners that applied for and got orders of conditions for basically twin activities. I put this aerial photo up here to give you an idea of the area from the two closest entrances, one being at Green Pond, and then the next one is right at the inlet at Vermont Yacht Club. So I'm going to submit this to the record since I didn't submit it yet, but I learned at a previous meeting that it's good to have that in the file just for reference. So this is a map that you can reference where the site is relative to other coastal areas. Vermont Beach, as I said earlier, entrance to Green Pond, and the different streets, and then there's, you've seen many of these properties on a notice of intent along this stretch of beach for other reasons in the past. So here's the point that we're also record for, which is the White Sands Association Beach Parcel, which is here. And it's also the very end of Davis Neck Road, which is town-owned road. And if you remember, you approved the seawall reconstruction, and at that time, we had to secure an easement from the town because we were doing work, and we were actually, the applicant at that time actually prepared the wall on the town's land. So there was an agreement for access and who was responsible for maintaining things, and that easement was secured. So access to do this beach nourishment will be through the very same area. It'll be through the area of the dead bayberry, and the sand would be delivered at the top of the riprap. It would be basically dumped by a small dump truck over the side, and a ramp would be created with the sand that we're using for nourishment. And a small bobcat type machine would do the placement of the sand. There's a construction methodology, and it's the same methodology we used on Panriello right next door, and the one further to the west. A couple of unique things about this application. What we're hopeful that you will approve is to allow us to create this 8-foot wide access so that we can do the work. And upon completion of the initial beach nourishment, allow the 8-foot wide access to remain so that in successive years we can use the same access. And when the order has been has expired and all of the nourishment that you've approved has been placed, to allow the 8-foot wide path to remain in the event that sometime in the future, unknown, when nourishment may be needed again, you can again use that same access. One of the things I know that you're concerned about, and Jen and I talked about it, was the fact that this planting has not survived. So people that got permission to do the seawall repair, after the initial planting was done by the contractor, the owner didn't follow up with maintenance, it died. So it doesn't set a good example to be here tonight asking for more work. But I can tell you that Mr. Marcotte and Mr. Doherty have every intention of seeing the project through. Mr. Marcotte is very motivated to see this beach maintained and nourished because it is in effect maintenance of this wall, because without sand here, the wall has the potential to have failure issues, and he lives directly next door. So he's very motivated that this area be maintained, just like a lot of the other beaches on this stretch, as a beach so that the wall doesn't fail. That all being said, I know that it's troubling to see all the dead plants out there, but Mr. Marcotte did show good intention by posting the bond, which he had to do anyway. He wants this to look good. He wants this to be a buffer. We talked about a condition, Jen and I, if you were to approve this, that would require him to delineate by stakes the access, which it is staked, but to review the stakes, and before any actual beach nourishment activities occur, to have all other planting that was required on previous orders of conditions installed, have the site inspected, and then and only then be allowed to proceed with the beach nourishment. And of course, we would expect monitoring to make sure that they survive after the beach nourishment is done. That pretty much sums up the project. Mr. Doherty's here, if there's questions for him about the history of this. And I'm here to answer questions.
Thanks, Mike. Jen?
Yes, Madam Chairman, Mike and I did talk about some of those aspects today. If the board were to allow this project to go forward, there are a couple of things that the staff would like to see. One, apparently the client's attorney and the town's attorney are in disagreement whether a new easement needs to be secured through the Board of Selectmen. One other thing, Mike, is you might need Board of Selectmen approval to build the sand ramp and over their property, so that goes with the easement.
Mm-hmm.
So an easement will need to be secured by the applicant or a letter from Frank Duffy's office saying that an easement is not required.
An additional easement.
An additional easement, yes. I respectfully disagree with Mike. I don't think beach nourishment should be considered seawall maintenance. This is a brand new wall. We know why it was built. I think it's going down a slippery slope by saying that beach nourishment is seawall maintenance. So I just want to put that on the record. I do think we need to go out, and I can go out and review the stakes with the applicant's representative, stake that access quite well, and then have all the plantings reestablished before beach nourishment activities are underway. I mean, this site is unfortunately in terrible, terrible shape. That's pretty much it, and monitoring requirements, plantings, because it's a difficult site, and again, there was no follow-through on the former order of conditions on caring for those plants, even though it was in the OOC and actually in the easement agreement with the town. But that, Mike, just one little thing, when did Mr. Marcotte purchase the property?
I don't know the specific dates. I'd have to get back to you on that.
You might
Unless
want to change your, the only reason I asked, sorry, I hate when I cut you off. You might want to change the name. on the property. You have Mary Carter
Oh, yeah,
on the
right,
plan.
yeah.
So just if you could submit a new plan, and maybe you can wait to do that until we go and really specify where that construction access is, and then show that on the new plan, because I would like everything outside of that construction access planted prior to the project going forward.
Sure,
And you can
understood.
do that, and then get the easement if required, and permission and all of that. Those are my only comments.
Okay?
Oh, one more, low tide only, because the water was, as you said, Madam Chairman, you were out there right before I was.
And the water was
right
lapping?
at the end of that wall.
Lapping on the
Right
wall.
up at the bottom of the wall this afternoon, about 5 o'clock. So you are gonna wanna work only in low tide.
Yes, well, we can't place any sand above, below mean high
Yep.
water.
Must have been a high tide.
Well, if, I know what you're
Yeah.
making reference to. The beach does widen out, so right at these stairs, there's really, you can't really nourish right at the stairs. You have to start west of the
If it was
stairs.
a little deeper, you could have dived in.
But I think if you were there, you might have noticed the beach one lot over that they have been doing the nourishment on is in much better shape. I mean, depending on how you define better shape, that's how I think of a beach.
There was a beach there, you mean?
It was a sandy beach there.
Oh, that's right, we differ on our definitions of beaches, don't we? Tommy?
I have a question. Would you consider this project, is it more beach nourishment or more wall maintenance?
There's actually no proposed true wall maintenance, meaning no.
Well, the beach is gonna hold the wall.
Yeah, when we think about a seawall like this in an environment like this, with a system of the beach moving and shifting, one of the reasons these walls fail is if the beach goes away and the toe stones get exposed and then they start to lean forward. The walls, it's a thing called creeping failure. It slowly starts to open up gaps and then tides work it. So placement of the sand, in our opinion, is sort of like the first line of defense to protect the wall, which is the real armoring. So it's sort of maintaining it, in our opinion, because the sand is making it so you don't have to do more extensive work to the wall. You know, maintaining it, keeping it in place.
Okay. That was my only question.
Court?
Just a clarification, Lot 3 there, that's the white sands, correct?
Yes, which is basically the northern
Yeah,
boundary is
yeah.
here and it goes.
Right. So that's white sands, and Marcotte is the one above it, and the town is over here. Okay, that's all. No questions.
Mike?
Okay, moving forward, would you give spot elevations on a plan? Could you put a date next to them, particularly when they're below the water?
Yes, in fact, we will do that. What'll happen, I expect if you issue an order, you're gonna want beach monitoring overs. And what we do is, when we do the next post-nourishment plan, if this goes forward, we would go out and do new transects.
Okay.
And then everything would be dated, so you could see the changes in cross-section.
Okay, that's the point, because I was there just about mid-tide today, and there is no beach as I think of a beach. Maybe not as some other people see a beach, but there was no beach there. And I just really wonder about you got up to 2 feet of sand, and I don't think you'd be putting it underwater.
Yeah.
And so which gets me to the point, are you asking for 450 yards, or are you asking sufficient sand? Or
Well,
is there a difference?
Well, what we asked for was approximately 12 inches of sand maximum at any given nourishment
Episode.
thank you, which would be 150 cubic yards estimated, for a total of 3 different episodes, assuming that we
Right.
did it once a year, for a total of 450. Up to 150 on any episode, but no more than 450 over the 3-year period.
And that limit of the sand will be determined based on?
Based on conditions on site. The initial one will probably be certainly 150 yards, and then maybe the next time, if Mother Nature is cooperative and the sand stays, then we wouldn't have to do as much next episode.
I guess it's the horizontal determination. I was there, at mid-tide, the water was about at the property line, all that water between I guess it's that property line and the east step, so that wall was underwater.
Yeah, right.
So, I mean, I don't quite see how you're gonna put sand from between there and the property line.
There's going to probably be little or no beach nourishment here.
Okay.
But as you work your way east, this widens out.
I'll buy that. Next, I'm good.
Next.
Next, I guess.
I
How
guess
you
that's
say
you.
this?
The construction access, it's a smaller truck gonna be used, that's multiple trips in and out. But we wanna have plantings in there. In each episode, that construction access, I just see it not being survived for the duration of the permit. Because I'm sure that everybody has the intent of being able to nourish this beach every year. And that would be something that, if there's a construction access, maybe you might have to be a little more creative on what that is. I'm one of the guys, form follows function. I'd rather have a path that isn't planted as part of, that you're just gonna have to constantly replant. I just don't see the.
Right.
That's what he wants too.
That's what I want too.
And, no.
Well, I can explain the thinking on this. We picked 8 foot wide after talking with the contractor.
8 foot, and that's the thing, I'm a little suspect at 8 foot. That's, I'm a 10 foot kinda, or even 9 foot at minimum for just fudge factor. I mean, 8 foot is really, you're threading a needle. You're getting.
Well, we're happy to make it wider if you're concerned about.
But that's not what's proposed, I'm just letting you know how I feel.
Right.
He's gonna have to do a new plan,
Mhm.
because we still have to discuss that.
Well, you asked me, and it goes from just being a beach nourishment to a path that's gonna be repeatedly used. It's not gonna be it's a mini road.
Absolutely. That's
It's
concern
a
of
mini
staff,
road because
too.
this 3-year permit comes up, and then they're gonna, you'll want an extension. Every right to ask for those things. But it's gonna, it's not just construction access. It's gonna end up being a conduit for everyone. And
Well, it is kind of a conduit, because this is a White
Yes,
Sands
and I'm not
Association
saying that it
beach, and
shouldn't
this is a
be. I
public
just-
beach,
And I'm not
although
saying it
there's not
shouldn't
much of a
be.
beach there.
I'm not saying it shouldn't be. I'm 8 foot in my, you asked me if I had a question, I got a question. 8 foot to me, for what the maintenance of this going in there, I just am a little suspect of.
Well, let's circle back to that in a
Okay.
minute.
And the equipment on the beach when it's being used, we want to make sure that the hydraulics in it are green. So that,
And we remembered that last week when you weren't here.
awesome. That's all I got.
Michelle.
I have no additional questions.
I have a couple of questions, Mike. You have a question? Go ahead. Thank you, Court. Last week, we had a nourishment project that you, Tara, suggested, and it was, well, here's what my concern is. since I went out there, I didn't have time to do the volume of sand that would be required to do a ramp down, but I think that's a pretty big volume. I mean,
That's probably 50 yards.
50 yards out of your 150 yards, but you need that ramp there to get the machine back up.
Right, so what happens is you build the ramp, and your machine goes down and he spreads the other 100 yards.
Right.
Then you take the small machine out, and then the rest of it has to be spread using the arm of an excavator from up above, and then
From the
spread.
top?
And then hand spread. You paint your way out of the room, so to speak.
Okay, yep, I understand what you're saying.
The final 50 yards, if that's what it is like the final part of the room as you walk.
Right, the
back
last
out of it.
4 inches that you spread across the top. Okay, but, so where I'm going with this is, so the technology, and I think you've been here, I don't know if you were here last week when we discussed it, but it came up a couple of years ago for something that McGansett, was it, that was proposed?
Matterman's project, yeah, Wild
Yeah.
Harbor.
Wild Harbor, where, and Tara would know what the name of the system is, but it's you bring a truck in and
Yeah.
it's like a cement mixer. And you-
Conveyor belt. Oh, the conveyor?
Yeah, you have a conveyor belt.
Well, we had a technology on that project, because I presented that one.
Oh, that's right, that was
yeah.
your project.
Right, and there was a local contractor, Gary Tavares, who has a machine that you can stage remotely,
Right,
and it's almost like one of those bark mulch blowers that you see. It has a big
right, but so you see where I'm going with this? That might be a more appropriate
It might be.
technology,
Yeah,
and it
we-
might eliminate our problem. We could have just a single path,
4-foot wide path,
a 4-foot wide path, because people are gonna have to walk back and forth,
or 6-foot.
and it would eliminate the construction access.
Well,
That works.
getting back to the path, we asked for the 8-foot to give us more flexibility, or maybe I'll revise the plan because I'm listening to what Commissioner Cora was saying, and maybe ask for 10, just so we're not nipping those little edges of the vegetation each time we back a truck in there. But I asked for that. I wouldn't be surprised if you made a condition that you have to, after you do the initial nourishment the first year, you have to make it 4 feet. The only reason I asked for it wider was so that we wouldn't have to every year take those plants out, heel them in, back down, put them back in. But I don't know that I want to limit, I'm hopeful that you won't limit me to the methodology of delivery of the sand, because that's a very specialized, that kind of puts a monopoly on who the contractor can be. There's not many guys that do it.
Well, the thing is, I mean,
I would.
it's not like I'm trying to limit, or, I don't know who any of these contractors are. I'm just saying that methodology is most appropriate in this kind of situation.
Well,
You
if-
might be limited, Mike.
And
I mean,
so-
instead of listening to Tom about widening the path, this is a conservation commission, we want the plantings. That whole area before the wall was built was completely vegetated with this little tiny 4-foot wide path, and now it's basically a road. The chairman, less is more, plant most of that buffer back and
Yeah.
use a different methodology.
I'm not going to argue with you. I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
I would, whatever you condition it to be is what it will be.
Yeah, I mean, I think it will solve your problem.
Well, and if I may, just another point, what size excavator is going to be able to reach down to do the spreading?
Well, it'd be like something less than 8 feet wide. I know.
Oh, I understand that, but you'd need something with a long reach to get
Yeah.
from the top of the wall and down.
Right.
And that's why, again, I'm a form, follows function. That, I'm just,
Well, I can tell you that the exact methodology was used over here,
yes.
and it worked. The only thing that was different over there was we didn't have a limitation because it was all grass to get through the yard.
Okay, I have another concern. This is, again, those of us who were on the board when the seawall was rebuilt. And admittedly, it's, a much better construction methodology now than what was formerly there. But you were from there, you remember how it was eaten out from behind. And even now, right along the seawall, there's a you already see probably from heavy rains, there's been erosion behind it.
No, that's from storms.
From,
It's
waves
called,
going up over.
Run-up, the
Yeah.
water runs up over.
Yep,
Yeah, no rainwater did that,
that's from,
storm.
that's seawater.
That's seawater, especially at the street end of it.
What?
I said more of a reason to have that whole top vegetated.
Well, that's what I was gonna say. Is there, you people who do vegetation, like you do any vegetation that can deal with occasionally being doused with seawater? Like dune vegetation?
Yeah.
Planted along there just to stabilize that.
If you look at the Pano Yellows, the one that was renourished a few years ago, he's got seagrass all along the wall, and that stays there in the snow.
Yeah, because those roots will go
Those
down.
roots go in, and even though they may look like they're dead, they come back.
Yep,
But the other plantings that were required there, it was done twice. The reason why they didn't survive is because...
excuse me, I want to hear what you have to say, but before the vice chair reminds me, you have to come up, tell us who you are again, and then explain.
Madam Chairman and the commissioners, my name is Bill Doherty, and I live at 22 Davis Neck Road. And I've owned a home there for 43 years, and I built a new home there in 2000, and I'm living there permanently since 2000. Because when you buy a home on that street, you become a member of the association. There's 26 homes. And I've been the trustee. There's 3 trustees that own the beach property for the White Sands Association. I've been a trustee for 20 years, and I'm the treasurer. And there's 2 other fellows that from time to time have changed, but I've been there for 20 years. And I've seen everything that goes on down at that beach and the seawall. And the previous owner, I had fights with them constantly. They wanted, I don't know, you remember everything because most of you people were on the commission. And they wanted to, the wall came from right across here, right to here. That's what it did. And it was being destroyed. There were 3 or 4 years when nobody from the town, fireworks, when it was 4th of July, nobody could go down there because it was dangerous. We had to put up one of them orange fences with signs on it just to keep the people out of there. Somebody from the town came down one time and said, if you don't do something, we're going to put a Jersey barrier up there just for protection of people.
Yeah,
So,
it's a big void.
but for 2 or 3 years, nobody could go down there at all. So these people here then wanted to sell the property, and they couldn't sell it in the condition that that seawall was in. And nobody wanted to buy the property. So then they wanted to repair the seawall. Well, the seawall is on White Sands property. Even though they're a member of White Sands, they had no control over repairing the seawall or do anything to the seawall. So we told them, you can't repair the seawall. And and then we came to you through Mike Baselli, and we were going to take the wall down, and you approved the plan to take the wall down. And then they got a cease and desist for us, those people, because they claimed that we weren't protecting their property, which we weren't. And I said to them, you need to put the wall on your property, because we don't have the finances to replace or repair that wall every time it gets damaged from the seawall. So they hired a lawyer, and then we had meetings with Mike Boselli and another engineer from down in Mashpee, and I said I wanted you to, I'll compromise and put a wall up, but I want to get our White Sands Beach back, that their father had put that seawall up years ago before there was any Conservation Commission. And he put that seawall up, and it was too close to the water, and it was, every time there was a storm, it was getting damaged, which is what's happening right here now. That's, this is where most of the damage is, and I wanted that to be brought right across, but it was gonna be a cost factor for them, so, but in order for the White Sands to agree to this, they had to move that wall back. And then we gave whoever owns that property, at that time it was Carter and Whitney, but we gave them a right-of-way to, an easement, to repair that wall, and they were financially responsible from the day that they signed that whoever owns that house is responsible for maintaining the seawall, both from White Sands and the town. And now Mr. Marcotte, but the beauty of it now is Mr. Marcotte wants everything to look perfect, like I do.
Okay, well, I'm just gonna suggest that the top of that seawall be planted with, add some sand along there and plant it with seagrass, and it'll help
There's no
protect it, as
question
you
that
know.
we want to do that. We want it to be perfect. But years ago, this street, there was nothing there. It was a street, and there's a cable that went across there that was put in because cars could drive right down and go off.
Off the edge?
Off the edge, yeah. And then, because of lack of maintenance or anyone taking care of it, a lot of invasive stuff and Rosa rugosa grew in there. But originally, that's the town street that goes right down, and that's what it was, but it's not paved. It was paved until you got to Willis Lane in North Chalk. That's where the paving stopped, and then it was a dirt road.
Yeah, well, I think having a vegetated area with a little path through will be better for,
It would be, and there has to be really a couple of paths, because this is a set of stairways for the White Sands, and this is a set of stairways for the town. And unfortunately, if they brought it back, the town people, it would be a beach, but right now there's no beach there. Because it's the tide, global warming that's an effect of global warming, and it's just, but the storms come up there and hit that wall,
yeah, well,
big time. And I go down there, I was down there in the hurricane, Sandy hurricane took but the plantings that were done here originally, and both times, they were done in the fall of the year, and they can't survive the winter. It wasn't, the bayberry was dead by the time Hurricane Sandy came, because it was, the first time they didn't even water it, the Nantucket Sound Trust, they didn't even water it. The second planting, they put a watering system in, but it wasn't maintained properly, so people were going down to the beach walking in mud, because it was just flooding all the time. And I knew that wasn't going to work, and so it really drowned the plants the second time around.
yeah.
But this time, if we, Greg Marcotte, he's got no problem doing anything you want, but we want this thing to look nice for the people to use it. And he's living right there. It's a summer home for him, but he wants it pristine. So whatever you want to do, he's going to do it. And my responsibility is just to do the beach nourishment
Okay,
with him. And he knows that he's got that responsibility
for the vegetation.
for the vegetation.
Good, good.
And he's willing to do anything he wants. But I think it would be a good idea, if it was an 8-foot path or a 10-foot path, then you wouldn't need two paths. It'd be just one path going down there, and it would go both ways. But
And just, Madam Chairman, you know how the staff feels about a 10-foot, even an 8-foot wide path in this area.
Yeah,
It
we'll
wasn't
have
there
to, we'll have to
before.
discuss that.
okay.
I like the conveyor belt idea.
Yes,
The testimony has been that the waves come up to the wall in this area and probably will continue to during large storm. So where's the sand going to go when it's carried out? Where will it go from here?
you want it back? That's
Oh,
why.
I'm sorry.
That's why I asked him to bring the aerial that he showed us first.
Oh, I missed that part.
I mean, that's what I said last week,
Oh, okay.
and I happened to,
That's right, you did.
I happened to meet Mike earlier this week, and he said, oh, I should bring an aerial for
Yep.
today's, and I said, yep, that's
You did
okay.
show that, but where, you could point it again.
Green Pond and Monot,
Okay.
and Bourne's Pond,
Just
sort of right in the middle.
For reference, we're right here, here's Green Pond to the west,
Uh-huh.
Monarch Beach over here, and all along this
Are the little
beachfront
groins.
are stone groins. My experience here, I've been working on this property, or one property right next to it for probably 8 years now, is the sand gets stacked up in at certain times of the year and gets pulled back offshore. Now, I'm sure that some goes in the prevailing downdraft direction, but there's many physical obstructions that, in fact, there's one right here, and I've seen that it traps sand, so it wants to go
Okay.
from the prevailing wind this way. It does move offshore and onshore seasonally, but there's no inlets nearby that are gonna be affected.
Okay, thanks.
We'll take it back, Mike. So,
Sorry.
do we have all the information we need to make a decision?
Just,
Courtney,
yeah, following up on
Michelle's question?
Michelle's question about where it goes, which was actually going to be my question. You're anticipating nourishing once a year for 3 years? Is that your plan? Is that the 450?
Yes.
And what happens after 3 years and it's gone?
We may come back and ask for it again. What else can we do? We may ask for an extension before the 3 years expire. You may or may not grant it. You have discretion.
It's like, it's one of those things, it's like all of these beach nourish projects, they're great, and I understand why people want to do them. You're dealing with forces in nature here that want to make things go in different places, and you dump it in and it goes away, and you dump it in and it goes away, and it goes somewhere else, and it becomes somebody else's problem. And, I just have...
Or not, or it might become someone else's blessing. We don't know.
Sometimes you don't need it every year, or every 2 years.
No, I'm not that this isn't a good project or a bad, it's just that it's a concern of mine about any of these things when you're dealing with a highly dynamic coastline.
When you walk, if you hear about this all the time. I've seen documentaries on it, where on the coast of other states, Florida, there's wholesale. The Woods Hole Group, I'm sure, is involved with some of these larger projects. There's hundreds of thousands of cubic yards placed. It's literally shoveling sand against the tide. That's what we're faced with. But what other solution is there but to try to stand your ground and try to maintain the property, other than to let it go? It's a town.
Well, we're not going to get into that
Right.
philosophical discussion.
No.
Michelle?
I know the purpose is to make a beach, but was there any consideration to doing maybe a little bit of planting, maybe along the toe of that wall to help keep that sand there long-term? Maybe
problem
a
with-
strip of planting?
The problem with that is if you did plant along the bottom of this, it would be such a narrow strip, it wouldn't really accomplish anything. The only way you could try to do it would be plant wider, and then you're taking away why they have a beach. So that isn't an option.
But even a strip of planting at the root system seems like it would help keep at least some of that sand there.
It's very dynamic area.
Well, it's worth a shot. If the whole purpose is to have a beach and to keep a beach, then
And to protect
maybe
the wall.
it is. What?
And to protect the wall.
And to protect the wall, then maybe it's worth a shot for one season to see how it does.
Well, I can tell you, we're not interested in doing that. If you choose to make it a condition, fine, but that's not what we choose to do.
I have
But
movie,
you're
I have
choosing-
movie of what that looks like in the storms, not hurricanes. It wouldn't grow there, it'd be washed right away.
Along with all
Right,
the
I think the
sand.
idea is that there could be if
It's gonna
if
get
it
washed
were a
away
calm-
anyhow.
If it were calm for a season or two, then it would be protect with little storms? I mean, we can't answer the if question.
I mean,
We don't know what the storms are gonna be
you could,
and so forth. We'll discuss that in deliberation.
The whole, I mean, the village is wall maintenance, but they don't even want to protect the toe of it. so-
We'll discuss it in deliberation. Does anybody need any further information at this point?
Move to close the hearing and take it under advisement.
Second?
Are there any questions? Other questions on the board? Any questions from the audience? And at any rate, one of the conditions is going to be a new plan, because there are certain things that were discussed that may be incorporated into the plan. Okay, there's a motion and a second on the table to close the hearing and take it under advisement. Maybe there isn't.
Yeah,
What's
there
that?
is.
Well, there is. Who made it?
I
Tommy?
made the motion.
Motion, I second.
Courtney, Mike.
We're way ahead of you, Dr. Kelly.
Well, no, it's not me. It's Susan. Usually I would say, Susan, is there a motion? And yes, she would have said no. Okay, there's a motion and a second on the table to close this hearing and take it under advisement. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Any abstention? Unanimous, so moved. Thank you, gentlemen. Okay, continued requests for hearings under a notice of intent. Black Beach Harbor Head Association, Little Neck Bars Road, Black Beach Road,
Black Beach Hills.
Black Beach Hills Road, Gilbert Lane, and Drift Road, West Falmouth, for permission to implement proposed road maintenance and storm water management improvements that include vegetated swales and addition of dense grade crushed stone along approximately 1 mile of private gravel roads and the associated clearing, excavating, grading, and landscaping. Jen, do we need these two?
Just green cards.
Thank you. Jen?
I'll save any of my comments after Mr. Vaccaro's presentation.
Good evening, Jack.
Good evening, Chairman Gladfelter. Good evening, Commissioners. I'm Jack Vaccaro. I'm here on behalf of the Black Beach Harbor Head Association. Black Beach Harbor Head Association is the neighborhood association that's charged with the maintenance of the road system serving the 32 homeowners in the neighborhood of Black Beach Hills. The roads include Little Neck Bars Road, Black Beach Hills Road, Drift Road, as well as Gilbert Lane and Puffin Lane. Give me just a minute. I think what I'd like to do, it's kind of a complex area, very interesting area. What I'd like to do is sort of walk the commission through the road system and point out some of the interesting wetland features along the way. So if you could all just refer to sheet 1 of your plan set. We'll go through this in the same manner that any of the residents might enter the neighborhood, and that would be off of Chappaquiddick Road, just west of the Chappaquiddick Bridge, where you would make a left turn onto Little Neck Road. There's a salt pond on your immediate left as you do make that turn. It is connected to West Falmouth Harbor by a culvert underneath Chappaquiddick Road in this area. The road kind of goes along the western edge of that pond and then diverts through the dune field to an area where there's a culvert that goes beneath the road, joins to a bordering vegetated wetland on the south side of Little Neck Bars Road. So you have this very interesting area of a massive dune field that extends basically from this road all the way out to across the Barrowman's Beach Club area and on out to Buzzards Bay. And nestled within those dunes, you have these very interesting freshwater wetlands, a series of 5 of them that occur along the west side of Little Neck Bars Road. These are isolated systems that are basically in the low areas between dunes. Very interesting. So as I said, you pass those systems and you cross over the culvert where you, at that point, have salt marsh and bordering vegetated wetland on either side of the road. And then we get to this three-way intersection where Little Neck Bars continues to the east and Black Beach Hills Road diverts to the south. And yeah, if we go on to sheet 2 of 4, we'll just follow Little Neck Bars Road on out to the end. This is another interesting area of the neighborhood where we're crossing very close to the harbor head, the southernmost projection of West Falmouth Harbor. This is that embayment that you can see if you're driving over the Chappaquay Bridge, headed, let's say, back to Falmouth, would be on your right. It's that body of water that extends down towards the south. So we pass very close along the edge of West Falmouth Harbor at that location, and then continue along a isolated freshwater wetland up in this area of the site, and then towards the end of the of Little Neck Bars Road, basically terminates at the bike path. Okay. There's also another wetland area to the north of the terminus, where this is related again to a bordering vegetated wetland that's associated with West Falmouth Harbor. Okay. Go to sheet 3 now. Okay, this is the Black Beach Hills Road segment of the project. I kind of get a kick out of Black Beach Hills. These are not great hills. These are pretty low relief. Actually, there's not much of a range of topography for the entire site. We have a low of about 4 feet way down at the southern end of Drift Road. The high point on Black Beach Hills Road, all of about 7 feet. Okay, so it's about a yard of elevation change. But anyhow, another area where we're passing fairly close to a salt pond, beach pond, which is part of the Great Sipawissat Marsh estuary. So we're passing alongside that. Then we continue on. Black Beach Hills Road becomes Drift Road and continues on sheet 4 all the way down to Black Beach. And at the southern end, we come alongside the edge of the salt marsh that's associated with the Great Sipawissat Marsh. So many, many types of resource areas here. We have salt pond, salt marsh, bordering vegetated wetland. There's a couple of small areas of coastal bank. The entire project is within land subject to coastal storm flowage. And of course, we're also in the DCPC. Interestingly enough, there's 2 segments of Barrier Beach that we cross as well. The middle segment, the Black Beach Hills segment of the road, that is the only portion that is not in Barrier Beach. Black Beach Hills segment and that most southern section of Little Neck Bars Road. That's part of the Till Ridge that extends towards Buzzards Bay from the West Falmouth Moraine. But the segments north and south of that region are both in Barrier Beach as established by the state CZM. Any questions about resource areas?
Oh, I'm glad you mentioned Barrier Beach, though.
We do have Barrier Beach, yes. So what I'd like to do next is talk to you a little bit about what's being proposed here in terms of the road maintenance first and then drainage improvements. I apologize for the it's a little cumbersome here with so much going on. But what we really want to do first and foremost is just establish a good level surface for the road, a safe driving surface certainly. It's pitted in places. There's some ruts that have been developed. There's some areas where there's puddling. The roads are just in need of repair. And so the way this is accomplished is first you go through with a grader to establish the desired road cross-section. In this case, there's really 3 road profiles or road cross-sections that are being proposed for the project. There's the simple condition, which is basically a flat cross-section, okay? The Second condition is a super elevated where we're sloping, not crowning, but sloping in one direction. And that's being applied in this project to direct runoff from the road away from sensitive wetland areas. And then the last and most complex of the cross sections is again that super elevated sloping condition on the road cross section, but also adding a vegetated swale that would receive road runoff and collect it in a manner that it can more slowly percolate through the ground rather than being directed directly into nearby wetland areas. Okay? So if you look at sheet 1, you'll see that the entire section of Little Neck Road, this entire section of Little Neck Bars Road, is being super elevated to force water away from West Falmouth Harbor. It gets a little bit complicated here. We have to make a decision where we have wetlands on either side of the road in the area of that culvert. We made a decision to shed the water to the side that would result in the longest transport time for water from the road back to West Falmouth Harbor. So rather than shedding it to the West Falmouth Harbor side, we're doing the best we can. We're shedding it to the freshwater side of that break, of that culvert. You'll notice also that this entire section is very well serviced with these vegetated swales. We've put them at every conceivable location to try to promote good percolation to the water table. Okay. Similarly, on sheet 2, you will see, if you look through the construction notes, the super elevation continues along the edge of West Falmouth Harbor. We're shedding water now away from the harbor. Unfortunately, because of the number of driveways and infrastructure on the opposite side of the road there, we really don't have the opportunity to install vegetated swales, so we're just relying on the land's ability to absorb the water that's directed that way. Once we get past the harbor area, we are proposing flat grading it, basically the first most simple profile that I pointed out on sheet 1. So it's a basic, the intention there is there's really no sensitive resource areas. We do have a isolated freshwater wetland here up at wetland 5, but it's basically already functioning as a retention area as it is, and it will continue to do that now. If you go to sheet 3, you'll see, again, more of the same with respect to location of vegetated swales and super elevation. Sorry. Again, super elevating the road to direct runoff away from Beach Pond. And once we get past Beach Pond, we would be flat grading the remaining section of Drift Road. Okay? So the road maintenance takes there's two aspects to it. There's the initial grading to establish the desired road profile. And then we would bring in road materials, new dense grade roadbed materials. We're looking to put in 2.5 to 3 inches of material throughout the entire road surface. Not looking to widen the road in any way or make it any larger. We're simply going to work within that existing footprint to reestablish the roadbed. In areas within 50 feet of the wetlands, we are proposing to put in a staked silt fence, just to make sure that none of the material that's set along these areas, particularly areas like Beach Pond, where it's a fairly steep road embankment, we would be capturing any of that material, preventing it from getting into the wetland. It's not, it's Beach Pond, I would say, of the resource areas that we cross, Beach Pond, West Falmouth Harbor certainly, and the salt pond up near the culvert probably the most sensitive areas, but we're showing silt vents at any location along this project where we're within 50 feet of any wetland. Okay. Talk to you a little bit about the stormwater improvements, which are essentially these vegetated swales. And, you know, it was, I think Jack Landers Colley, the engineer for this project, did a nice job of trying to provide some measure of stormwater improvements without absolutely ruining the site by putting in a lot of man-made structures. This is a pretty low-tech, non-invasive way of providing a lot of benefits in terms of protecting the nearby resources. They're fairly tight. They're only about 2 feet wide. They'll be about 1 foot to 1.5 foot deep. We would overdig them by about 2 inches, then apply some screened loam, and plant all of these with a conservation mix. So we have submitted a seed mix at your agent's request, and they should be part of the package as well. So really, that's the extent of the project, and I think I'll stop there and try to address any questions you might have.
Okay, thanks, Jack.
Yep.
Jen, no questions? Court?
A couple of questions. In the dense graders, are you using native or are you using the bluestone?
We can use native.
Okay. And the soils underneath this, is it sand or is it peat or is it a mix? What is it?
It's sand in the Barrier Beach areas,
Yeah.
and it is till in Black Beach Hills and Little Neck.
Yeah, the reason is, I mean, I'm thinking in terms of and I agree, I think the concept of these sort of non-invasive ways of getting rid of the storm runoff as opposed to putting,
Drainage
you know,
structures.
great big pits in the ground and things that fill up with sand and become useless is a good way. It's just a question, is the soils, where you're doing these things, do you know that the soils are permeable enough to have it actually go in the ground?
Yeah, we've looked at that, and certainly that first segment there, Little Neck Bars Road down to Black Beach Hills Road is good permeable material. We do have a couple of swales that go onto the Black Beach Hills Road, and those would be a little more suspect, but you know, it's not going to have the same percolation rate there, but they should function just fine.
Yeah. No, it's got to be done.
Yeah.
Fine. No, I have no other questions.
Okay, Tommy?
Yeah, have you thought about a bridge the whole way?
Excuse me?
What is the most amount of dense grade you're going to be putting throughout the whole?
675 yards, I think there's a notation on sheet 1.
I mean, in a specific low spot, how much dense grade will you be adding? Say the lowest spot now, in inches.
Well, we're only talking on the whole about 2.5 to 3 inches.
As an average? Or?
As an average. Now, there are a couple of places where there's some puddling that's developed. There might be a puddle that's 1.5 inches, 2 inches deep, and in those locations, it would be 5, maybe 6 inches tops.
And then as far as maintenance goes, you'll just do that as it comes for adding more dense grade?
Yeah, I mean, this permit would be valid for 3 years. And my understanding is that road maintenance could proceed on an annual basis on this as needed.
That's it. Looks good to me.
Mike?
I walked portions of it, not all of it. I won't take claim to that. I guess if I have any comments, at times I had a hard time knowing where your swales were, just being in the field, walking along, and I'm taking your place. In some places, my sense, looking at the road and the size of the swale, that they may be large, if you will, and not as large as you may do as much harm in creating them as you think you're doing. Good. That's my observation. I looked at the calculations, and I think you're being very conservative on the volume of water you could see. So it is under the heading of less may be more, do no harm, that'd be my only request. And I do say that at places I was a little bit lost, just walking along, I wasn't sure where a swale would stop or start. So, but that is really your judgment, and I think the intent is right. I'm with Tom, a nice road bridge across the whole thing would probably, we could argue
We're
about.
not going there, guys. And besides, I don't think any of us would want to see a structure like that.
Well, some of us civil engineers might, that's okay.
Well, that's true. Tom?
I am very pleased to see this report, and I'm grateful for all the strong efforts by all the parties involved. I know this was started on a stub toe, but this is far from being a stub toe. There's a lot of good information here. There's a lot of real intent on this. And as I motioned to Betsy just a minute ago, my proposal is to have this as a 5-year permit, because this is what a maintenance program is all about. This is one of the reasons that a notice, I think, is your strongest. This is your ace. This is going to be something that once this is established and everybody's on the track of this, that this thing should be, in my eyes, bulletproof. It's then a maintenance of an association road, and that's how I feel about it. I think the swales are appropriately sized. I'm of the ilk where if it looks, I'm always overbuilding. I think that the maintenance of this, once the structure is established and the permit is issued, it's the maintenance of it. It no longer will get out of hand. You'll have a tool, very much like the machines that'll be on the street, for you to be able to access this so it does not become degraded, so that outside of, an earthquake splitting the road, there shouldn't be these overwhelming events that you can't respond to. I'm very happy to see this in here.
Michelle?
I'm also happy to see this project before us. This is a great step forward. I had some questions about the stormwater proposed. I am a professional stormwater engineer, basically. So I kind of do this work. I've done specific gravel road work a lot, these tight spaces with where you have a linear, your space is very linear. I think a swale is very appropriate for this location. I just have some concerns to make sure that it's done in the right way for this road. And I'm not sure if it's overkill or not in terms of the calculations that were provided aren't really specific enough for each of these swales. I have no information on how much exactly of the road is going to drain into each swale in terms of coming up with a size for them. I couldn't tell that from any of the information provided. The cross-section of the swale was helpful, but I'm not sure in which direction, if it's supposed to be conveying water in one direction or another. I think it's meant just for that 1 inch, the water quality storm event.
That's correct. Yeah, it's not meant to convey water at all. It's.
But for larger storm events, then it just.
It would at that point have to overflow into the adjacent land, but it would capture certainly most rainfall events.
Okay. I would like to see a little bit more information about, in terms of knowing that the sizing is correct for how much of the road is draining into each one, because it really has to be specific for the drainage area that's flowing to it. And that may well have been done. I couldn't see it. Couldn't see it with what was submitted. And also the type of swale. In some locations, it looks like it's literally right up against an identified wetland, which would make me question if it's going to intercept groundwater or not. Did you have concerns about that?
On some of them I do, yes. should explain, I'm not a stormwater engineer myself. Jack Linder's-Colley is the engineer of record on this project, and unfortunately, Jack couldn't be here this evening. So I can only address the,
Right.
as a layman. Looking at the plans, I certainly had some concerns about one or two of them that are very close to the wetlands for that reason.
I don't think that, I mean, other than having an actual impact to the resource, and within the buffer, intercepting groundwater is not necessarily a bad thing. It just means that the swale needs to be designed as a wet swale.
Yeah.
So it's more of a linear constructed wetland versus the dry swale that is meant to actually infiltrate down through the swale. So I think some thought needs to be given to that, so that when this, does go to construction, it's going to make a difference in what plants are put there and how it's constructed and that sort of thing. So I think it is kind of important to have an understanding of what type of swale it's going to be before you dig into this. In terms of, for the road, the plan is to grade it with a 2% slope towards the swale. What is your expectation that on a dense grade road, that slope will be kept after it's being driven over?
Yeah, I mean, it's something that will have to be maintained, certainly. Not just cars going on it, but snow plows will have an effect on it over time. It's a slope that you can't expect to be there forever. And the 2% is not a whole lot. I think we're talking about a 2-inch cut on one side of the road versus a 2-inch fill on the other side.
I would expect it not to stay very long, unfortunately, and then your swale is no longer receiving runoff. Was there any thought to putting in maybe with some water bars occasionally to actually convey the water across the road?
Yeah, again, it's a very level roadway.
I know.
That's a problem. We're doing the best we can, I think, with super elevating the road, but I don't think there's enough slope on really any segment here where a water bar would lend itself.
I'm just concerned that after all this work, you may be somewhat in the same situation with, with the dense grade or the compacted materials. Though it is so level up there, particularly in the cross sections where you are just making it level. The water sitting on the road is what leads to the rutting and the potholes and all of that. And I'm just going to throw it out there because I've seen it on a recent project. Have you considered at all using some sort of grid structure that's backfilled with gravel that allows the water to flow through the surface and keeps it off so that you can prevent some of that rutting and potholes?
For the entire road surface?
For the road surface.
No, we had not considered that.
I've seen it, particularly on flat areas, be quite successful and really reduce long-term maintenance and solve a lot of the stormwater issues, water sitting on the road, particularly. Some of these I've been focusing on the areas with the swales, but a lot of the road is proposed to basically be graded level. Just throwing that out there.
Yeah, no, it's a good thought. I just, I think that, another option for us would be to propose flat leveling the whole way and just planning to hit it every year and like it has been hit for many years in the past. I don't know really whether the road surface, the matted surface that you're suggesting is feasible for this one. I'd have to talk it over with Jack Colley, obviously, to see if it's something that could be done. But my thought is that a 2%, offering a 2% grade with swales is, I think it's a good solution.
And if it stays as a 2%, I would just hate to have to do the work and not have it actually do anything. So I just throw that out there. Another question I had was that whole length of the road from Chappaquoit is pretty wide in that section. I don't know if I should even bring it up, actually reducing the travel width, not the whole way, having areas that are the existing width that they are now, but you could actually build the swale in the existing footprint, and that would give a little bit more space in terms of slopes of swale and that sort of thing.
That section of road is the only section of road where 2 cars can pass.
So you would definitely leave sections where 2 cars could pass. Again, just throwing that out there. If you're having trouble with space, it does seem like that whole length there, you wouldn't need 2 cars to drive together all the way down the road, and that might reduce costs in terms of how much has to be maintained over the long run. Again, just an idea to think about. And then the last thing, I think, is in terms of the silt fence. You have proposed silt fence in a lot of the sensitive areas along the roadway, but silt fence can be damaging to put in. You have to trench it in along, in some areas, potentially right in the wetland resource, and perhaps something more like a staked silt sock would work better instead of a silt fence. I think that's all for me.
Okay, I actually live on a dirt road, and we actually had it redone, and you're familiar with the road. And what I'm wondering is, and actually this is for those of you who are the homeowners there, on our dirt road, there are only 20 people 20 houses, and only 10 of them are occupied in a full year, and so the amount of traffic is going to be much less than you're going to have, especially in the summertime. And our traffic, especially the 20 of us who live there, go really slowly, and we don't have a problem with washboards. We do have 2 places where actually it was pitched. We had ours designed to pitch because of problems, and then those pitches have stayed pretty well.
Okay, good.
Yeah, and the other aspect that, again, it's not nearly as much travel as you're going to get, but there's been a little bit, we do have it graded occasionally for maintenance, and we have had areas kind of refilled. Wherever there are potholes, way back when there was a problem and we had it redone, that's where the potholes still reform. And so that I guess the point of this is, anybody who's lived on a dirt road knows that if there's too much traffic and people go 30 miles an hour, it's going to be washboard. And so I'm just wondering if there's any thought to try to sort of control that. Those of you who live there don't really want a washboard road, but you can't control all the other traffic that's there. So, yeah.
Hi, I'm Steve Doyle. I live at 28 Gilbert Lane, president of the association. So, aside from the condition of the road, the other topic of discussion every summer is about trying to make sure people drive slowly along the road. Because essentially we have kids on bicycles, a lot of people are trying to cut through to go to the beach and so forth. So we've talked about putting signs, we've talked, parts of it, we've talked about putting up, the little
speed tables.
Speed bumps, yeah, speed tables, which we have, just to try and slow people down. And we've talked to people, we have guards in the summertime. We have about 32, I guess, houses or so on it, but there's only about 4 of us who live there all year round. Some people come just on the weekends as well, over time. So we don't get, the big traffic times between, late June through mid-September. And the only time that there's real issue with people driving quickly is usually people who don't live there, who are coming in on summertime.
It's the same problem, yeah.
And so, there's only so much we can do. You know, have had signs, we've talked about trying to put up a 5-mile-per-hour sign. Not thinking that people will really go 5 miles, but if you put up 10, they'll go 15, if you put up 5, hopefully they'll go 10. But I don't think there's anything more we could do about the speed.
Yeah, we haven't done that on our street, but we've had the same. People say, oh, 15, I'm saying, well, if you put 15, they're gonna go 20.
Right.
And the fact is, people who live, we have a lot of little kids, and the people who live there always drive slowly and carefully. But you're right, I mean, and it's, you know, I know you were saying there's problems with delivery trucks and construction.
Well, that's true, and we've called them at times. Sometimes there's particular deliverers that come from time to time. We do a call to them and tell them to drive slowly.
If I may, Madam Chair, I'm working out on Associates Road. You can go out there today and you ask anybody that goes out there, any of the workmen that work on Associates Road, who TC is. I am absolutely their worst nightmare. From those pillars forward, any vehicle that my company, any subs, I am absolutely the worst. Fire-haired, slow down, get off the street, don't be stupid kind of guy. In the conversations that I've had with all the delivery people that I had to deal with, please, if you're, without naming names, the dumpster that goes by on your street, call them directly. And the oil truck and the propane truck, call them directly and tell them that TC, the vice chair of the Conservation Commission, brought up on camera that their name, which is not being used now, would be directly used as someone that is interfering with a project that many people, myself included, put a lot of effort into. Because when I see them, I'm going to let them know how I feel about them traveling down that road. My efforts on this board are not going to be taken lightly by anybody abusing what I'm permitting you. I've got a lot vested in this as well. I know you guys tremendously do, but I live here, I work here, and I don't accept that, you know, and as an association, the businessmen that come down that street, their employees that drive down your road, you guys are the boss, you know, so don't ever hesitate.
We're out there all the time trying to tell them. We do make those calls, and then they get new drivers, and I think it's just.
And if you want to,
it's a constant thing. It's not.
Right. It's a communication issue,
Right.
but I think all of us tend to think, well, we've already told them. It's like a friend of mine who actually, this is when I was 30 and he was my age, said, you know, somebody's in a lecture and they ask a question and I think, did I already answer that question? Then I realized it was her mother that I answered the question for. So, but it is something to keep in mind that, you know, every year it's worth making the telephone call to say, remember, if you're going to be delivering oil or FedEx packages or whatever. Courtney.
Yeah, for the record, I would agree with Tom in regard of having this permit go for 5 years. I think it just makes sense. You're dealing with an ongoing thing. Second observation, when you do this work, you're grading, are you going to roll it too?
I don't think there's any plan to roll this out, no, it would just be applied with a grader.
Have you thought of that? And is there?
It might be a good idea, in light of the concerns expressed by one of the commissioners this evening.
And once you rework that grade and you've got places where you're filling up potholes and that kind of stuff, particularly where they have a tendency to keep coming back,
It's a very good suggestion.
you know, you might want to do that. I have no other questions. We ready to close it?
No, what was your question was, are you going to use a roller?
Yeah.
Doesn't that seem appropriate?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then my other point was observation that this should probably be a 5-year deal. It makes more sense.
The other question, the other comment that I have is, again, and it's just for your own, you know, just for your own records and for us too, maybe establish well, I don't know, I mean, it's a long way, so you'd have to think about it, but digital cameras are easy to do. Establish a series of places you'll take photographs, and give us like a yearly report, and, so you have some idea of what went wrong or what's going to need work. And those are the things, maybe once a year before the season, before you have a grading, you could come in and because when you do a major work, if you have a permit, you'd have to tell the conservation office, but, you could show, if you had this photographic record, you could show, and then you'd sort of identify where some of these problem areas are, and at some point, you may want to incorporate some of this technology for certain areas, maybe need that grid rather than just the whole road. So I think this is something you could learn as you go along. Well, before we close it,
We need a continuance,
well,
so
I think we need a continuance to
I-
go
I
over some of the
personally-
questions you brought up.
I personally feel like we need a continuance.
Yeah.
But I don't know if the board feels that way.
Of course, we prefer to close this evening so that the work can be done before the summer season.
Jack, the board would like some additional information just to make sure the drainage swales are sized correctly. I understand that you're speaking for your client. It is March, this has been delayed by, for various reasons. I think a couple of more weeks will be fine.
Okay, so did I understand then that we could continue it out to the next hearing?
Well, is Jack back to do the sizing of the swales?
Not for the next hearing, no.
Okay, so.
Well, for the next hearing, you mean next week?
I'm sorry, you're every week here in Falmouth, aren't you?
Yes.
You said
Yeah.
2 weeks from now.
2 weeks from now, we have town meeting.
It's town meeting, so it could
would
be 3
the
weeks.
The 17th of April, we could do it,
So
Jack, you'd be back.
17th of April, we would close, and then you would issue when, the 20?
Yeah, 24th, 1st, something like that.
Okay.
May.
Yeah, I mean, we could
You
vote
can have it, you
the
can
next
have it
week.
ordered by the middle of May.
I think that would
I mean, latest, and if all the work is addressed.
I mean, we can vote,
swales.
we can vote the week after we close it.
Yeah, after you close it,
Yeah.
yes. If all the information is given to you and you guys are satisfied with the
Mhm.
information provided, that's fine, yeah.
Mike?
It's not like there's an alternative.
There's not much of a choice, I'm afraid, now. If we're insisting on a continuance, then we'll request the continuance.
And, Jack, when is the other Jack back, do you know?
He should be back in 2 weeks. Yeah.
So he'll
He told
be
me he was-
back, is that going to give, okay, so, we need to call it. Just so I don't, you know what I mean, so he doesn't get back and I want to make
Okay,
sure
if we
that
have
you
it
guys
the
have
17th.
enough time to provide the information that you need
Yeah,
to
we'll
provide.
be fine, Jen. We can,
We need the information the week ahead of time.
yeah. I
That's
understand.
not gonna happen, so, because he's gone
No,
for
but-
3 weeks?
Jack is in communication with his office, and
Oh, okay,
we can
all
get
right.
this done.
Okay.
Mike?
Just, if you get 2 engineers and come up with only 3 opinions, you're lucky.
Well,
I wanna-
engineers are
You're
that
you're
way.
minimizing there, and just to be clear,
So April
where
17th.
where I'm coming from is, my concern is that there may be too many swales in an area that is better off as it is than, as you say, flat grade and live with it, rather than potential damage that could be done in constructing the swale. That's my major concern. I mean, that's where I'm coming from, and I'm sure my fellow engineer may have she may think that there's not enough swale, so that's something to be resolved, but my personal consideration is that I don't want more work done, that a swale that won't be maintained because every year you're gonna be throwing more gravel into that swale, and I just,
I understand.
simple and less may be more.
And And through Chairman Gladfelder, could I ask for clarification, please, on exactly what information we need to, on the swales?
Well, I would like to know, I mean, there wasn't any information on how each swale was sized, what the volume they're meant to hold, and how that relates to what's draining to it. I would imagine that that exists somewhere, but there was just some general.
You want to know the surface area that's
Yeah.
draining into that swale.
And how much water, how much volume that the swale will
Right.
hold.
Right.
Yeah.
And also look into whether or not the swales near the wetland areas are designed correctly as a dry swale or a wet swale.
Correct.
Correct.
Yep.
And you say on here that it could be a 1-to-1 side slope. I would strongly recommend against a 1-to-1 side slope on the swale. But you may not need it to be as well. I mean, that's what I'm saying. I can't really comment on the swales because I don't have enough information. But a 1-to-1 side slope is probably going to erode and be hard to stabilize. So, but you might not need it as wide. I don't know.
Okay? Okay. And the other comment that you made was consider, especially in wetland areas, using a Tootsie Roll sock rather than.
Tootsie Roll sock, nice.
Tootsie Roll sock rather than
Never
a.
quite heard it like that.
You have silt fence in those areas, but instead of digging and.
Just a wattle to hold it down rather than.
Yeah, Tootsie Roll sock.
Trenching it in.
To one person's waddle and others.
Oh,
Tootsie
wow,
Roll sock.
yes. Prefer water.
Okay?
Very good.
Thank you, Jack.
Thank you all.
At the
Okay, well,
request
we're
of the
not done yet.
applicant,
Yes,
I'd like to propose a continuance to
April 17th.
April 17th, please.
Second.
Any other questions on the board? Any questions from the audience? Okay, motion on the table is a continuance till April 17th. Hopefully we can clear up these final few and have a lovely road out there this summer. Okay, motion is second on the table. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstention? Unanimous, so moved. You with us, Susan? Got it.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Jack.
Thank you, Jack.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Jack. I literally lost.
Ladies and gentlemen, as you exit, if you want to continue your conversation, go far enough away, because we still have a few more. Thank you. William McGann, 5 Foster Road, East Falmouth, for permission,
You, Mr. Sheriff.
where am I? Permission to establish a 12-foot wide construction access route, completely remove the existing filter fabric, and most existing riprap rocks, and to reconstruct and expand the existing riprap revetment with new materials, the planting of beach grass, and the replacement of any disturbed woody vegetated resource area buffer / resource area and associated clearing, grading, and landscaping. And we're also going to simultaneously open up the continued, you thought I was going to forget, continued request to amend the existing order of conditions. William McGann, 5 Foster Road, East Falmouth. Request to amend the existing order of conditions, DEP number 253535, to establish a 12-foot construction access route, placement and grading of approximately 175 cubic yards of compatible sand on the front side of the coastal dune, replacement of any disturbed woody vegetated resource area, buffer / resource area with bayberry and associated clearing, grading, and landscaping. Jen?
Yes, Madam Chairman, this was continued for 1 week, so the applicant's representatives could get their plans to match the construction access. We moved
Which
the
they did do.
construction access away from the
Property line.
Thank you, Jack, along the town
Town
right of
road.
way and moved it closer to McGann's property.
Yes.
Yes, I know we had some discussion about that.
Right.
And we showed that the dune on McGann's property was going to be
planted
With beach grass on the
beach grass
face.
on the face.
And both of
Oh,
those
done.
things were done.
And as Tara said in her last presentation, the amended will continue the annual beach monitoring, which you heard is very important to the board, beach nourishment monitoring.
Yes.
Yes.
Which you did do. I asked
That's
whether you
yes,
had
that's
done
right,
it the
we
last
did.
time. Right. Tara, do you want to say anything, or should we just close these hearings?
Yes, no.
Do you want to say anything?
No, I don't think I need to say anything, other than I'm Tara Martin from the Woods Hole Group. I represent Bill McGann.
Okay.
The other thing was we did not have an SE number last week, which came in at 6:45 the night of the hearing, but
Yes,
neither
it
Jen
did.
or I knew that. So we get an SE number. I don't think DEP had any comments.
No, they did not.
We revised both the drawings to show the beach grass in the amended, to show the revised construction access so that they matched up perfectly. That information was presented to Jen on Monday, and unless you have any additional questions, I would request that you close the hearing.
Okay, well, let's see whether we do. Do we have any additional questions? We have to close each hearing separately.
I'll move to close the first one on the docket there.
Okay, which is the first one on the docket?
Is the establishing the 12-foot construction access and removing filter fabric and expand existing riprap revetment.
Okay,
I'll move to close that and take it under advisement.
Second?
okay. Any other questions? You with us, Susan? Okay, we have a motion and a second on the table to close William McGann, 5 Foster Road. This is a hearing under a notice of intent. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstention? Unanimous, so moved.
And I'll move to close the hearing on the request to amend the existing order of conditions DEP 25-3535. I move to close the hearing and take it under advisement.
Second?
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any questions? Okay, motion and a second on the table to close the hearing and take it under advisement. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstention? Unanimous, so moved.
I do have a couple of questions. Not,
You have some
doesn't
questions.
impact the vote. Will you vote on this next week? Because time is of the essence here. We're really trying to get this done before the summer. And if you vote on it next week, I know that we're going to get an order before the 21 days.
Well, you
and
know
then we have
what?
a
We
10-day
are going to
appeal
vote it.
period.
I can tell you we're going to vote it next
We
week
have to vote it next week
because
because we have town meeting.
we have town meeting. The answer is
Okay.
yes.
And does the 21 days start when you close the hearing or when you
Yes,
vote?
close.
When you close the hearing?
Yep.
And
Okay.
Any way of getting it
Next time,
before the 21 days?
if it's such
or
a
no?
rush, don't put it in the middle of, March. If it's
I know.
such a rush to get your projects done, don't put it to us in the springtime. Plan ahead.
Okay. Fair enough. Well, I have one other question.
Yep.
Can you, I know you guys are gonna vote right now. Can you vote on that first so I can go home? I'm paying babysitter. I really wanna get out of here.
Are we going to vote
Are
those
we gonna
tonight?
vote that?
Yeah, we
It's
can vote on that.
last.
It's just
Last.
the beach nourishment, it was just
Oh.
the added beach nourishment one. It's last on your agenda.
Are we going to vote the others?
My agenda fall in front of me?
Are we going to vote the others?
Yes, we are.
All right. Well, we'll do yours first so you can go home.
That's fine.
Great,
yeah.
thank you
Robert?
very much.
Wamet, 17 Foster Road, East Falmouth.
Here it is.
Was that
Oh,
open
I'm
last
sorry.
week?
Yeah, we can't vote.
Scrambling, no, my notes on this one. Yes, Madam Chairman, this was the amended order you heard last week to add 400 cubic yards of sand to this property, build up that dune. There was a question of whether the board wanted to have that dune as well, faced with beach grass. You're all just looking at it.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we do.
We agreed to that.
Yes,
We
they
to that
agreed
last
to
week.
that.
So
And I
the-
didn't have Beth give me any plan on that one when she came in the other day,
Right,
but.
because you guys had closed it last week
Yeah.
anyway, so.
Susan,
we'll
it's
require
everyone
you-
but Tom is on the quorum. Yeah.
So we'll do the monitoring again. It's an amendment, so we'll just carry over the special conditions for the original project, which included all of the monitoring.
Yep, yep, and it's just stabilize that front,
Yep,
hopefully stabilize it.
yep, that's fine.
Okay, we have a motion? Let's have Tommy do a motion. I don't want him to fall asleep there.
I make a motion to accept the orders as discussed.
I'll second that.
Okay, motion and a second on the table. Are there any further questions? Okay, all in favor of the motion on the table, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstention? Unanimous, so
Good
moved.
night, Sarah.
Have a good night. Thank you
Good night.
very much.
Michael and Barista Shea, 121 Wicker Tree Road, North Falmouth.
Yeah, this is,
And,
is this all the same form?
no,
No,
it's not.
Tommy, can you do me a favor and reach?
Actually, I think I'm
Sorry,
the one who's not on these.
Teresa was out, so.
I'll get it. Here on this Wicker Tree.
Should be the same form on all three.
Tommy, Mike, Tom, Court.
Okay. Gentlemen, oh, I remember this night. Remember this little project, Band of Wicker Tree? They're gonna take it down, rebuild. There was encroachment on town property. They said they would restore. Tom, you wanted a special condition regarding the retaining wall. If it went, you wanted it rebuilt under an amendment. Was that you or Courtney? It was one of you.
Yes,
There
correct.
are 2 trees needed under the conditions, and 2 oaks that they want to remove, so we discussed removal of those, damage to those trees, and adding provisions and special conditions regarding the oak trees. And that is all I have.
I'd like to make a motion to accept the order as discussed.
Second.
Motion and a second on the table to accept the order as discussed. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstention? Unanimous, so moved.
Oh, Chappaqua Associates Road, West Falmouth, same quorum. This is the rebuild of the wall and the removal of that.
Yeah, breaking it down at the
And
at
breaking
grade.
that weird concrete structure down at the end.
Yes.
Just rebuilding that stone wall. Remember, Mike?
Associates Road is all the way in the corner. The stairs, that happy crap and the...
Oh, yeah, and the little stone. Yep.
Yep. Simple revetment reconstruction.
Hey, gentlemen, we have a motion.
I have a motion to accept the order as discussed.
Do I have a second? Motion and a second on the table. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstention? Unanimous, so moved. Jen?
Yes, ma'am. Oh, 14 Quahog Pond, 14 Quahog Pond Road in West Falmouth. Madam Chairman, you weren't on this one. What is
Well-
it? Can you check the quorum?
Well, I did check the quorum, but I'm a little confused, because all it says on the quorum is this you?
Yeah, Mike's the...
Did I not write something down?
It says Tommy, Ed, Mike. Is Tom not on it?
What day was that? I was here for that.
No, this was 2 weeks ago. You weren't here.
I wasn't here.
And
I was
Michelle
chair.
wasn't here. Tom was chair, Mike was here, Courtney here,
So
Tommy
Tom's
was here.
name should be down. So it's the same
Yeah.
quorum.
Correct.
You guys are all looking at me like this is the first time you've
No,
ever
you should be
heard of this
looking at me.
project.
I forgot to write it down.
Mike specifically knows
Showed
this
me.
project because I was out in Lorraine with him.
That's right, yeah, you got a picture of him.
Yeah.
This project is a little different. This is a project in West Falmouth where the applicant would like to rebuild the cottage. They have pulled it back from the wetland a bit. They have offered mitigation plantings in accordance with FWR resource area buffer regulations, but they have not offered the mitigation required under your DCPC regulations. It's all ringing a bell now, isn't it, gentlemen? So, that was made very apparent at the hearing that
They were not
the plan
simultaneous.
still lacked the requirements under the DCPC regulations. There are 2 options to this. You could vote to approve the project and not vote and vote the
I'm listening
project
to you, Jen,
down.
but But I actually can't
because
vote.
it-
Are
no,
the guys
because
who are gonna vote listening to Jen?
Yes, I am.
No, they're really not, because it does not meet your regulations, or what I would recommend is you approve the project with the requirement and special condition that they do
The DCP planting.
require the planting under the DCPC regulations, which you'll have to provide a new plan of reference. The good thing about the DCPC regulations is that the plantings can go anywhere on the property and not specifically within the resource area buffer. So there are areas on the property that they can plant and still comply with the DCPC regulations. And that's the recommendation that I would make to the board. Approve the project with the special condition that those regulations do need to be complied with.
By issuance of an amended plan.
An amended plan, and that those plantings do need to be installed prior to the start of work.
And I believe,
It's a perfect time of year to start planting.
and I believe this discussion was said to
Absolutely
the
took
applicant,
place.
that he's fully aware that the board felt
Yes.
in that
They had
direction.
Attorney Wall here to represent them.
Yep.
Yep.
Okay. I make a motion to approve the project with the amended plan showing the plantings for the DCPC area as well.
Yep, and that those plantings be installed prior to construction.
That is the one yes.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second on the table to approve this project, but with a plan to come in to reflect the additional plantings for the DCPC. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstention? Unanimous, so moved. All right, other business.
I have one quick thing under.
Discussion, well, I didn't say what it was. Discussion of surplus properties.
Yes, what that means is I sent you all an email a couple of weeks ago that the town planner had sent me regarding what the town has called surplus parcels within the town. Before you, I put this little colored chart. Two of the parcels I would like you to focus on are the two parcels in blue located directly adjacent to Spectacle Pond. What you don't realize, or what you may realize looking at this, is that those two parcels are complete wetland parcels. The parcel in the middle is also owned by the town of Falmouth. I believe these parcels are important, one, because they border Spectacle Pond and they offer a wetland and a vegetated buffer to that pond. They are within the Water Resource Protection District and Zone 2 to the Crooked Pond well site. So I do think these parcels are important to our goals under the Conservation Commission and also to the town. They wanted us to look at whether or not any of these would be valuable for passive open space. I believe they're valuable for other reasons, and also I'm not quite sure what the value would be. You can't develop these parcels. So
You could put a trail through it.
I would ask, or I'd make the recommendation that this board send a response back saying that you would like the town to keep those parcels and possibly put them under your care and control.
We already do this one.
And the town of Falmouth already has that parcel in the middle.
So it would be
Yeah.
Contiguous,
All those
yeah.
contiguous
So you have
area.
3 wetland parcels along Spectacle Pond within that Zone 2. And remember that under your regulations, a property, a wetland that borders a Zone 2
Has a
has a
100-foot
100-foot
buffer.
no-touch buffer
Yeah.
to that parcel. It's treated just like a salt marsh and just like a vernal pool. So it would be very difficult to develop those parcels.
Motion to,
Oh, I have 2 more. And I didn't get a chance to print those out. These are located in North Falmouth off of Cordwood Road, off of 151. You would know them, Tom. They're back near the Crane Wildlife. They're 2 very skinny parcels. I sent these to you as well a couple of weeks ago.
On either side of those two parcels, and they're adjacent to each other, is state land. One of them is Division of Fish and Wildlife, and the other one to the south is a different state agency. It's not Division of Fish and Wildlife. I don't see any resource area or value, not resource area, but recreational value to those. That's something the Board of Selectmen will need to determine. There's no, I think these parcels might be more valuable to the state since they flank those, but it's up to you. I mean, it's pretty much upland, woodland back there. There's no wetlands or.
Is there a wildlife corridor that goes through there?
There might be. I did not look at the wildlife corridor. But my recommendation to this board would be to see, and I briefly talked to the town planner about this in the hallway, is to see if the state would be interested in those parcels. Not so much for development, I don't think you can do much with them, but to see if the state would be interested in those parcels.
Those parcels are individual, they do not connect to an adjoining property for frontage.
No.
Yeah, okay.
Are all those stripes, are all those parcels like?
Different owners.
Yeah,
So a lot of them are the state.
thank you.
I didn't go through every little
But
strip
are
parcel
they like
bets
what,
to see who owns it.
10 yards wide and 200 feet long, or something like that?
Yeah, very long.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay,
I'm
so
not quite sure why they're configured like that. I'm sure there is
how about
a
if we,
reason.
how about if we have one of you put a motion on the table that the two parcels adjacent to Spectacle Pond,
That we feel there is some
we
value.
we
to
feel
them.
there's some value and we would be willing to take them under our jurisdiction,
Care and control, yes.
care and control, and that the others, we do not feel strongly about, but suggest that perhaps they might be sold,
To the state.
traded to the state for
Yeah.
a
I mean,
land
there
swap.
might be a passive recreational value to them. I'm not quite sure. I don't know how you would access the parcels. There's no
Okay,
easy
would
access
somebody
to
like to
them.
put
I
that
don't
motion?
think.
You couldn't have said it better, so I'll just refer to your language and say, I move that we adopt the, take over the Spectacle Pond parcels,
Well, it's a
and that the other two
recommendation.
parcels
No,
up on 151 be
You
offered to the state.
recommend that.
Recommend, yes.
That they have, that they have conservation value.
Yes.
And that,
I-
and that
Of
we
course,
would
that
be
was
willing,
all, it was all in my motion.
right,
You just missed it.
she'll help you with it. Could I have a second?
I already,
Oh, we have a second. Motion and a second on the, what's this called? Surplus properties. All in favor, Spectacle Pond. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstention? Unanimous, so moved.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Unanimous, so moved.